For 20 years, he had been setting up tents for polar explorers and military medics. Then, he fell asleep at the wheel and woke up in another world where the system had assigned him the most useless class in a century. Tent setter. Level 1. And immediately, it dropped him next to a dying woman in the middle of a night forest with 2 moons and creatures lurking in the darkness. Daniel Park opened his eyes on cold stone. It smells of smoke and wet earth. Above him are the soot-stained arches of a ruined chapel and a gaping hole in the roof through which a greenish light pours. Not sunlight. He blinks. 2 moons hang in the violet sky. He remembers the road. He remembers how his eyes closed on their own. He remembers the blow. Nothing after that. And now, a translucent panel flickers before his face, and letters form words in a language he has never studied, but somehow understands. Class assigned. Tent maker. Starting skill. Tent creation. Level 1. He sits motionless for 3 minutes. Exhales. Stands up. Brushes off his jeans. Chapel. Cracked walls. The altar split in 2. Dried blood on the floor. Old. Not his. Someone is moaning outside, quietly. The way people moan when they no longer have the strength to scream. Daniel steps over the debris and goes out. A woman is lying against the wall. A pool of dark blood has pooled beneath her cloak. Her face is white. Her lips are blue. A girl of about 10 sits nearby. She clutches a rag doll to her chest and stares at Daniel with huge eyes that hold no tears. They're gone. A howl echoes from behind the trees, long and drawn out, low. No earthly animal howls like that. Daniel looks at the panel. 1 item. Set up the tent. He looks at the woman bleeding to death, at the silent girl, at the black forest from which the howl comes. And this is where the strangest part begins. For 20 years, this man has been setting up shelters for those in need, for scientists in Alaska, for military medics in the mountains. He knows how fabric behaves in the cold, how to distribute the wind across a dome frame, how to direct a stream of people through the airlock so as not to chill the interior. And now someone hands him a tent skill and tosses him into the night forest with 2 moons. Fine. He clicks on the skill. The ground glows. Out of nowhere, a rough, thick canvas stretches out and pulls itself over a frame that assembles on its own. 5 seconds. 10. A tent stands before him, cramped, rough, but dry and warm. Inside are 2 mattresses and a warm light without a single lamp. Daniel lifts the woman. She weighs so little that it's scary. He carries her inside. He pulls off his shirt and presses it against the wound on his side. The wound is jagged, deep, not from a knife, from claws. The girl freezes at the entrance. He gives a crooked smile. He says his name is Dan, that they have a roof over their heads, and that's... The girl is silent. Then she comes in. She sits down next to her mother. She places the doll on her mother's chest. And finally, she cries. The forest howls outside the walls. 2 green moons shine through the canvas. He doesn't know the name of this world. He doesn't know the rules. He knows one thing. The woman in his arms is dying, and the tent is the only thing he can give her. By morning, the bleeding slows. Not because he's a doctor. He isn't a doctor. It's just that the tent is warmer than it should be. Much warmer. It's 25 degrees inside, even though it's cold outside. The fabric keeps out both the wind and the damp. The mattress is dry and soft. It's as if the tent knows there's a wounded man inside and adjusts accordingly. Daniel attributes it to shock and lack of sleep. He shouldn't have. In the morning, he steps outside. The forest is sparse. Birches mixed with something like ash trees with bluish bark. The trail heads east, and in the west, smoke rises. A whole wall of smoke on the horizon. Something is burning. Something big. He opens the panel and studies it. Tent creation, level 1, capacity 4 people, cooldown 24 hours. 1 active tent. That's all. No weapons, no armor, no fireballs. 1 tent for 4 people that reloads in a day. An hour later, he finds a stream. He drinks. He carries water to the girl in the only thing he could find, in a boot. She stares for a long time. Then she crawls over and drinks. For her mother, he soaks a cloth and presses it to her lips. By noon, the girl utters her first word. Lily. Her mother's name is Alice. They fled from the village. The village burned down. Something came out of the forest. Big, black, with claws. Dad stayed behind. Dad didn't come. Lily speaks in short sentences, without emotion, like a memorized script. By evening, Daniel knows 3 things. He is in another world. To the west, villages are burning, and creatures from the darkness are tearing through settlements. And he is alone, with a wounded woman and a girl who has lost her father. On the second night, the howling draws closer, much closer. Something heavy is moving among the trees. Branches crack. Daniel closes the tent flap. Lily presses herself against her mother. Footsteps pass by. They recede. He exhales. His hands are shaking. He is no hero, no warrior, no mage. An engineer from Colorado sitting in a tent, praying that the creature doesn't sense the warmth inside. In the morning, people arrive. 3 of them. An old man and a young couple, all covered in someone else's blood. The old man clutches a blacksmith's hammer as if it were the last thing he has left. He asks if Daniel is a bandit. Daniel replies that he isn't, that he has a tent and water. The old man's name is Khan, a blacksmith from Braunwood. The village was burned down 3 days ago. The young couple are Gareth and Nola, farmers. The field is now a black pit. Daniel lets them in. A tent for 4. There are already 6 of them. But the walls seem to expand by a hand's breadth, and there are more mattresses. On their own. He didn't create them. In the evening, Khan looks at the hammer and mutters that without a forge he's a useless old man. Daniel sits down next to him and asks at what temperature it works best. Khan looks at him as if he's crazy. Then he answers, 30 degrees. How high is the anvil? Just below the waist. Which side are the tongs on? Left. Left-handed. Do your knees hurt? Khan is silent. He nods. 20 years at the forge, my knees are shot. Daniel remembers everything. He doesn't sleep at night. He thinks. By the 3rd day, there are 11 of them. More families are coming out of the forest, all from different villages, all running east from the smoke and claws. Alice woke up for a moment, looked at Lily, smiled, fell asleep again. But she's breathing. The wound is drying up, slowly, not fast enough, but it's drying up. On the 3rd morning, Daniel opens the panel. Level 1. Experience isn't 0. 12 points. Where did they come from? He didn't fight. He didn't kill monsters. He just pitched a tent and let people in. The system counts that as experience. He clicks on the skill. The old tent folds up. Everyone gasps. Lily gasps. A new one is coming. A better one. He closes his eyes, and holds 11 people in his mind. Each one, Khan, the lefty, bad knees, 30 degrees, an anvil below the waist. A chair in the corner is a must. Lily is small. She needs a low cot by the wall so she doesn't roll off. Alice is wounded. She needs a firm, even surface and warmth on her wound. Gareth is tall. He needs a long mattress. Nola is cold. She needs a double blanket. The skill activates. What rises from the light isn't tarpaulin. It's a thick, smooth, dark green fabric. The frame assembles itself. Wider, higher. The tent is twice as big as the previous one on the outside, and even bigger on the inside. On the left is the living area. 11 sleeping spots, each its own. On the right, behind a partition, an anvil at the right height, a bellows with a pull, tools within easy reach. In the corner, an old, worn-out armchair, just the kind that's comfortable to sit in with worn-out knees. Khan follows him in. He freezes. He places his palm on the anvil. It's warm, as if it's already been warmed up. He sits down in the chair, and he cries. The old blacksmith who didn't cry when his village was burning, didn't cry when he ran through the forest. He sits in the chair made for him by a stranger with a ridiculous class, and cries. By evening, Khan forges his first nail, a bit crooked, but the first. He shows it to Daniel as if he were showing him a crown. Nola walks around the tent 3 times from the outside, then from the inside. She tells Gareth that there's more inside than outside. He shrugs. Magic is magic. Nola shakes her head. Magic is magic, but here everyone has their own blanket, and that's more important. At night, Daniel sits on the threshold. Lily approaches quietly. She sits down next to him. She doesn't snuggle up. She just sits close. He doesn't move closer. 10 minutes later, she rests her head on his shoulder. The doll is still in her hands. Daniel looks at the 2 green moons. He's a tent maker, level 1, the most ridiculous class in 100 years. No weapons, no strength, no magic except for the tent. But 11 people are sleeping warm tonight. The old man is hammering again, and the girl has rested her head on his shoulder. It's not enough, and it's enough. The 4th day began with a scream. Daniel jumped off the mattress and ran outside. Gareth was standing at the edge of the woods, pointing toward the trail. People were walking along it. 5. No, 7. They were dragging a cart behind them. A man lay on the cart. Even from 20 paces away, Daniel could see that his right leg was missing below the knee. The stump was wrapped in rags. The rags were brown with blood. A woman was walking beside the cart, holding a child in her arms. The child wasn't crying. Children who didn't cry frightened Daniel the most. He stepped out to meet them. He raised his hands. He showed that he was unarmed. The man leading the group spoke first. He was stocky, about 35 years old, with a scar across his left eyebrow. He asked whose camp it was. Daniel said it was his. The man asked which kingdom he belonged to. Daniel said none. The man narrowed his eyes. He asked what his class was. Daniel replied, tent dweller. The man was silent for about 5 seconds. Then he snorted. Then he laughed, briefly, without joy. He said that fate had a bad sense of humor. His name was Markel, a former foreman of the road patrol, a 4th-level hunter. He lost half his squad at a ford when a creature emerged from the water and dragged 3 men beneath the surface in a second. The rest ran. He ran too. Then he gathered those who could walk and headed east. Along the way, he picked up a family with a cart. The man on the cart was a carpenter. His name was Bren. He didn't lose his leg in battle. He fell off a roof while laying tiles. A week ago. The wound had become infected. He needed a healer, or at least clean bandages. Daniel had neither. But he had a tent. He led everyone inside. There was enough room. The walls had pushed apart again. Not much, about the size of a palm, maybe two, but it was enough. They laid Bren down next to Alice, two seriously wounded people side by side. Daniel thought about it, and the tent responded. A shelf appeared between their beds. On the shelf was a clean piece of cloth. Not bandages, but clean cloth that could be cut up. Markel saw it and stopped smiling. He asked where the cloth had come from. Daniel honestly said he didn't know. The tent itself. Markel gave him a long look. Then he said that he'd seen a lot of strange things in his life, but a tent that pulled cloth out of thin air was something new. By evening, there were 18 of them. The level 1 tent was bursting at the seams. Daniel could feel it. Not with his eyes, somewhere inside. His skill had a limit, and he was approaching it. 1 tent, originally for 4. He'd crammed 18 in. The quality was dropping. The mattresses had gotten thinner. The heat inside had dropped slightly. Khan's forge had shrunk. The old man noticed, but didn't say a word. He just kept forging nails. At night, Daniel sat at the panel and counted. Level 1, experience 29. 40 to reach level 2. 11 points a day. The system granted experience every time someone in the tent fell asleep, every time someone ate, every time Bren moaned in his sleep and the tent warmed his sleeping area just a little. The system counted every act of care, small or large. Morning of the 5th day. Daniel woke up to a ringing sound. The panel was flashing. Level 2. New skill available. Modular specialization. Description. When creating a tent, the owner can define its primary function: residential, medical, crafting. 2 active tents at a time. 2 tents. Daniel read it 3 times. Then he went outside. The morning was cold. Frost on the grass. His breath was steam. He looked at the chapel, at the tent, at the people who were starting to wake up inside. 2 tents. He could set up 2. He closed his eyes and thought for an hour. He sat on a rock by the stream and thought. Not about the layout, about the people. Bren will die if the wound gets worse. Alice is recovering, but slowly. 2 children from the new group are coughing. They need a medical tent. A separate one, clean, with both heat and ventilation, with a place with something that would at least slow the infection. But people also needed shelter. 18 people in 1 tent was cramped. Markel and his men were used to field conditions, but a family with children was not. Nola hadn't slept well. Gareth was nervous. Han needed space to work. Daniel made a decision. He took down the old tent. All stood in the clearing and watched. Lily held a doll. Han held a hammer. Markel kept his hand on his belt where his knife hung. Daniel activated his skill. The first tent, the medical tent. He thought of Brenna, of his severed leg, of the pus, of the fact that a 32-year-old carpenter could die of an infection in the middle of the forest because he fell off a roof. He thought of the coughing children, about the dampness that clogs the lungs, about how dryness is needed, sterility, warmth, but not heat, air circulation, but no drafts. The skill worked. A tent rose from the ground. White. Not green like the first one. White. Inside, it smelled of something fresh, like after the rain. 4 cots stood evenly spaced. There was room to walk between them. Hooks for cloth on the walls. A stack of clean towels on the shelf by the entrance. The floor was even, dry, warm. Daniel carried Brenna in first. He laid her down, unwrapped the rags from the stump. The wound was bad. Yellow pus, red edges. a smell that nearly made Daniel double over. But something happened inside the medical tent. The air around the wound grew warmer, cleaner. The pus didn't disappear, but Bren stopped moaning. For the first time in 2 days, his face relaxed. He fell asleep, deeply. Daniel activated the skill a second time, the living tent. He thought of everyone else, of each one individually. 14 people. No, with E, 15. She could already sit up. Lily hadn't left her side. The tent had sprung up next to the medical one, green, large. Inside, personal sleeping areas again. Khan's smithy behind a partition. A corner for the children with something like a soft rug on the floor. Markel came in last. He looked everything over, every corner, every seam. He went out, walked over to Daniel, said that in 10 years of service, he'd seen military camps set up by the kingdom's best engineers. None of them had done anything like this. Daniel shrugged, said he was just putting up tents. Markel shook his head, said no, not just tents. Then he fell silent. He couldn't find the words. He went to check the perimeter. The 6th day brought a problem. Food. They had almost none left. Gareth found a berry bush by the stream. Markel and one of his men killed a rabbit. 1. For 18 people. Daniel watched as Nola cooked a soup from the rabbit and berries in a pot they'd found in the ruins of the chapel. Watery. Clear. 3 sips per person. The children ate first, then the wounded, then the rest. Daniel ate last. Markel, too. They exchanged glances. Markel said quietly that tents were nice, but you couldn't fool your stomachs. They needed food. They needed to hunt. They needed fishing gear. We need knowledge of local plants. We need someone who knows about this. Among the 18 people, there wasn't a single hunter besides Markel himself. Farmers, a blacksmith, a carpenter, families, children. Not a single person who could feed the camp. Daniel nodded. He understood. The tent provided shelter and warmth, but it didn't provide bread. It didn't provide meat. It didn't provide safety from those creatures that howled closer and closer at night. On the 7th day, his experience reached 44 points. The panel displayed something new. Skill improvement. Tent creation, level 2. Maximum capacity, 10 people per tent. Basic environmental adaptation. Daniel read the description of the adaptation. The tent automatically adjusts to the local climate. Insulation in the cold, ventilation in the heat. He rolled up both tents and set them up again. The difference was noticeable. The walls were sturdier. The frame was stronger. The medical tent was now warmer, but had better ventilation at the same time. Bren opened his eyes. For the first time in 3 days. He looked around. He looked at his leg. He looked at Daniel. He asked where he was. Daniel said they were at camp, in a tent, safe. Bren asked who was paying. Daniel replied that no one was. Bren didn't believe him. In his world, no one did anything for free. Daniel didn't argue. He just brought him some water and 3 berries. Bren ate the berries, washed them down with water, looked at the tent ceiling, said it was a good seam, even, professional. Daniel didn't understand. Bren explained. He was a carpenter. He worked with wood and fabric. The seam on the tent was perfect, better than the craftsmen in the capital. Daniel replied that he hadn't sewn it. The tent had sewn itself. Bren snorted. He said the tent had good taste. It was the first joke in the camp. Nola heard it and laughed. Then Lily smiled. Then even Markel chuckled. On the 8th day, 3 more arrived. A woman in her 40s with 2 teenagers, her sons, 14 and 16. They had been walking for 4 days without food. The younger one could barely stand on his feet. Daniel led them into the living tent. Space was tight, 21 people in 2 tents. The system was creaking. He could feel it, physically, like a tightness behind his ribs. His skills were working at their limit. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. 21 people. Enough food for a day, maybe 2. Markel hunted every day and brought back less and less. The game was disappearing. Or the creatures of the forest had already eaten it. The stream provided water, the tents provided shelter. But without food, it was all meaningless. On the morning of the 9th day, Daniel made a decision. They had to move on. They had to leave the burned villages, head east, look for a city, a village, anything alive where there was food and people. He announced this in the morning. Markel nodded. He'd been expecting it. Gareth turned pale. He asked, "What about the tents?" Daniel said the tents would come with them. They would be packed up and set up again at the new location. All 21 people were looking at him. He saw the same thing in their eyes. Fear. They had just found a roof over their heads, and now they had to leave. Daniel said he understood. He said they would find a better place, with food, with safety. They just had to get there. Khan was the first to stand up. He tucked his hammer into his belt. He said he was ready. Markel was the second to stand up. He checked his knife. Lily took Daniel's hand. She just took it and held it. Alice got up on her own. For the first time in 9 days, she stood on her feet. She staggered. Daniel caught her. She said she would walk. Daniel took down the tents, both of them. In 10 minutes, each had turned into a bundle the size of a backpack. 21 people watched as the entire camp was packed into 2 bags. Brenna was loaded onto the cart. The children walked alongside the adults. Daniel carried both bundles on his back. They weighed like 2 packed backpacks. A 3-day journey. The trail wound through the forest. The trees changed. Blue-barked ash trees gave way to something resembling oaks, but with silvery leaves. Markel said this was the road to Mooring, a small town on the Alvin River, a trading hub, or had been a trading hub, before the front began creeping south. They walked slowly, Bren in the cart. Alice walked on her own but sat down on the side of the road every hour. The children were getting tired. The youngest of that woman's sons fell twice, got up, kept walking. Every evening, Daniel set up the tents. Every morning, he took them down. A ritual. 20 minutes to set up, 15 to take down. People got used to it, stopped gasping, started helping. Gareth hauled bundles. Nola laid out the mattresses even before the tent was fully open. Every evening, Khan's first task was to go to the anvil and forge. Nails, hooks, hinges. He stockpiled them, said they'd come in handy. On the 2nd day of the journey, Markel returned from the hunt empty-handed. There was no game, none at all. The forest was as if it had died out. Markel said quietly that it was a bad sign. When the small game disappears, it means the big game has arrived. On the 3rd day, they came to the edge of the forest. Down in the valley lay Mooring. Daniel stopped. Lily pulled him by the hand. He didn't move. Mooring was burning. Not now. It had already burned down. The blackened skeletons of houses stood in rows like charred teeth. The walls had collapsed. Not a single building had a roof. The bridge across the river was destroyed. Bodies lay in the streets. From the edge of the woods, Daniel saw them as dark spots on the gray earth. Lily hid her face in her doll. Nola pressed her hand to her lips. Markel stood silently and watched. His face was expressionless, the face of a man who had seen this before, more than once. Daniel went down first. Markel went with him. The city was dead, completely. The bodies had been lying there for at least a week. The creature of darkness had cut through here like a knife through butter. Claw marks on the stone. The walls weren't chopped down. They were torn apart, as if something enormous had simply swept its paw across it and the stone had crumbled. Markel pointed at City Hall, or rather, at what was left of it. The 2-story building had collapsed in on itself. The bodies were thickest in the square before him. People had fled here, seeking shelter. Sturdy walls, a thick door. It didn't help. The creature came through the wall. Daniel stood in the square of the dead city and watched. Sturdy walls, a thick door, reliable fortifications. Everything this world believed in. Walls, towers, fortresses. And it's all useless. Because the creature wasn't besieging the city. It simply passed right through it. He thought about this while Markel went around the houses looking for supplies. Walls don't work. Not against this threat. You could build a wall 10 meters high, 20, 100. The creature will come and tear it down. Because the creature doesn't play by the rules of a siege. It doesn't stand at the gates and wait until the supplies run out. It just breaks things. But if you can't build walls, what can you do? Daniel looked at the rolled-up tents behind him. They don't need to be broken. There's nothing to break. They pack up and leave. The creature comes and finds an empty field. Markel brought a sack of flour, half a sack, found it in the bakery's basement. The fire didn't reach it. Found a barrel of salted meat, salt, 4 blankets, an axe, a rope, a small stash. Enough to feed 21 people for 3 days, maybe 4 if they scrimped. They didn't go into the city as a whole group. Daniel set up camp on the edge of the woods. He pitched the tents. The people went inside. The children didn't see the bodies. Alice didn't see them. Lily didn't see them. Only Markel and Daniel saw them, and the 3 of Markel's men who had helped search for supplies. That evening, by the campfire, Markel sat down next to Daniel. He said that Mooring had stood for 300 years. Stone walls, a garrison, 20 guards with class abilities, archers, swordsmen, 1 fire mage. And that creature got through all of that in a single night. Daniel asked what kind of creature it was. Markel explained. Spawn of the Dark Rift. The rift opened 20 years ago in the north. Since then, creatures have been crawling out of it. All kinds. Small ones like wolves. Huge ones like houses. The most terrifying are the destroyers. Huge. Armored. They break stone like paper. 1 destroyer wiped out Mooring in a single night. Daniel asked if they could be killed. Markel said they could. It would take a squad of 20 fighters of level 10 or higher, or a single fighter of level 30. In all of Westmark, there might be 5 such people, and all of them are on the northern front, far from here. Daniel nodded. He asked what ordinary people do. Markel smirked. He said they die, or run. Kingdoms build walls and fortresses. People are herded into fortified cities, behind the walls, behind the towers. And when the beast comes and breaks down the walls, people find themselves trapped. They can't run away. They can't save themselves. They sit behind their impenetrable walls and wait until the food runs out or the beast breaks down the last door. Daniel listened, and with every word something clicked in his mind. These are traps. Fortresses are coffins. Settled life is a death sentence for those who cannot fight. And they are the majority. Farmers, artisans, children, the elderly. All they're told is to sit behind the walls and hope. But the walls won't hold. What if they didn't sit? What if they moved? He didn't say it out loud. It was too soon. In the morning, they moved on, past Mooring. along the banks of the Alven River to the southeast. Markel said there was a ford 2 days' journey away. Beyond the river, the trees are still intact. The creature went north, back to the rift past mooring. That's what they do. They come, they destroy, they leave. Like the tide. At the first rest stop, Khan approached Daniel. He held out something. A hook. A fishing hook. Forged from a nail. A bit crooked, but sharp. Daniel took the hook. He looked at Khan. The old man shrugged. He said the river was nearby, and the rabbits were gone. By evening, Gareth had caught 2 fish. Small, bony, but fish. Nola cooked a fish soup, 5 sips per person. The children ate first. On the second day of the journey, Alice approached Daniel during a rest stop. For the first time, they had a real conversation. She said she was grateful. Daniel nodded. She said her husband had died so that she and Lily could escape. He'd stood in the doorway of their house with an axe when the creature entered the village. He wasn't a warrior. He was a brewer. A brewer's class. One of those classes that weren't laughed at, but weren't respected either. He stood with an axe in front of the creature so his wife and daughter could make it to the forest. Alice said that Lily didn't know how her father had died. She only knew that he had stayed behind. Daniel said he wouldn't tell her. Alice looked him in the eyes. She said that Lily trusted him, that in 9 days the girl hadn't trusted anyone but him. Daniel said nothing. What could he say? A 10-year-old girl who had lost her home, lost her father, and nearly lost her mother, trusted a stranger from another world because he had pitched a tent. That evening, during a rest stop, Lily sat down next to him. As usual, a doll in her hands. She quietly asked if Daniel knew how to make little houses. Not tents. Little houses, like real ones, with a door and a window. Daniel thought about it. He said he'd try. Lily nodded. She said her doll needed a little house. The doll was tired of living without a home. Daniel looked at the doll. Ragged, faded, with buttons for eyes. One button was cracked. He took the doll in his hands. Lily handed it over without a fight. He examined it, then gave it back. Said that tomorrow the doll would have a home. Lily went to sleep. At night, Daniel sat by the fire. Markel was nearby, on guard. Daniel was thinking, not about the dollhouse, about the scale of it all. 21 people, 2 tents, 1 medical tent, 1 living tent, both packed. No room. There would be more people, he knew that. Refugees on the roads, thousands. They would find him, or he would find them. And everyone needs a roof over their head. And everyone needs food. And everyone needs safety. And he has 2 tents and a hook made from a nail. Markel seemed to have read his mind. He said that at the crossing over the Alven there's a settlement called Haven Cross. Small, but lively. A market, a tavern, a small garrison. The people there hadn't fled because the creature hadn't reached them yet. Not yet. Daniel asked if they would take them in. Markel said that refugees aren't welcome anywhere. But they aren't chased away either. Not yet. As long as they have something to pay for food. As long as they don't cause trouble. Daniel nodded. On the morning of the 11th day, they came to the river. Wide, fast, cold. Houses stood on the other bank, intact, with roofs, with smoke coming from the chimneys. Haven Cross. A living settlement. Nola sniffled. The children ran toward the shore. Markel stopped them. The crossing had been destroyed. The bridge lay in the water. Debris jutted out of the current like broken fingers. On the other side, by the ruined bridge, stood 2 guards. They were watching the column of 21 people. Markel raised his hands. He shouted that they were refugees, from Braunwood and the surrounding area. They needed a crossing. The guards exchanged glances. One went into the village, the other stayed to watch. They waited an hour. The guard returned with a man in a leather jacket, the village elder. Shouted across the river. The village elder asked how many there were. Markel replied, 21. The village elder asked if there were any sick people. Markel replied that there were wounded, but no sick people. The village elder asked if there was anyone among them with a useful class. Markel named himself, Hunter, 4th level. He named Khan, blacksmith. He named Brenna, carpenter. The village elder paused. Then he asked about the rest. Markel looked at Daniel. Daniel stepped forward. He shouted across the river that he was a tent maker. The village elder was silent for 3 seconds. Then he laughed. He shouted back that they had their own tents. He turned and walked away. The guards remained. One of them shrugged and shouted that there was a ford further downstream. Shallow, waist deep. You could cross. But it was better not to venture into the settlement. There was no room. Not enough food. Nothing to feed their own people. Daniel stood on the bank and watched the smoke rising from the chimneys across the river. 21 people behind him. Lily beside him, her hand in his. That man on the other bank had just laughed at him. A tent dweller. A useless class. Trash. Useless. Daniel turned to the people. He said they would set up camp here, on this bank, by the ford. He set up the tents, both of them, the medical tent for the wounded, the living quarters for the rest. Markel looked at him, asked what the plan was. Daniel answered. Khan is a blacksmith. Bren will be up soon, and he's a carpenter. Gareth is a farmer and knows the land. Markel is a hunter. Nola can cook something out of nothing. They aren't beggars asking to be taken in behind someone else's walls. They are people who know how to work. Tomorrow, Khan will forge knives, real ones. Morning of the 12th day. Daniel woke up before dawn. He stepped out of the tent. Fog hung over the river. It was cold. He stood and looked at the water. Havencross, on the other bank, was asleep. Smoke rose in steady plumes from the chimneys. A peaceful sight. Deceptive. Daniel turned toward the tents. 2 green dots in the fog. His world. His whole world. He went into the blacksmith section of the living tent. Khan was already awake. He was sitting in a chair, staring at the bellows. Daniel sat down next to him. He said he needed knives, 3 of them, good ones, for hunting. Khan nodded, asked if there was any metal. Daniel thought, remembered the axe Markel had found in mooring. Brought it over. Khan examined it, turned it over in his hands, said the steel was shoddy but would do for knives. The work began. The sound of a hammer on an anvil echoed across the river. Steady, rhythmic. The first knife was ready by noon. Rough, without a handle, but the blade was sharp. Khan wrapped the base with leather from an old belt. Markel took the knife. He turned it over in his hands, checked the balance, nodded. He went into the forest. He returned 3 hours later with 2 rabbits and a bird resembling a partridge. More food than in the last 4 days combined. Nola prepared a roast. The smell drifted across the river. On the other bank, the guards looked up. By evening, Khan had forged a second knife, better than the first. His hands remembered. His muscles remembered. On the 13th day, Gareth found a stretch of river floodplain with soft soil. He asked Daniel if he could dig. Daniel said he could. Gareth dug all day. In the evening, he showed the garden beds. Even. Neat. The problem was the seeds. There were no seeds. Gareth said that if he could find even a handful of barley, he could grow a crop in a month. The soil here is good, the river is nearby, the climate is mild. On the 14th day, Bren got back on his feet, or rather, on one foot. One leg and a homemade crutch made from a stick. He made his way out of the medical tent and looked around. He looked for a long time. Then he asked Khan for a saw. Khan said he didn't have a saw. Bren said he could make one from the third knife. Khan thought about it. He made one. The teeth were rough, uneven, but they cut. Bren, on one leg with his crutch, walked over to the nearest tree and sawed off a branch. Then a second. Then a third. By evening, there was a bench in front of the tent. Crooked, wobbly, but a bench. The first piece of furniture outside the tent. Khan sat down on it, rocked back and forth. Said it held. Bren said of course it held. He's a carpenter. Carpenters don't make benches that don't hold. Not even on one leg. The system reacted. Daniel's panel flashed. +3 experience points. For the bench, not for the tent. For the bench that another person made from materials provided by a third. The system counted the entire camp infrastructure, every improvement, every item that made people's lives better. On the 15th day, a boat approached the ford from the other bank. Sitting in the boat was a boy of about 14, red-haired, freckled. He rowed crookedly. He rowed up to the shore. He got out. He looked at the camp, at the tents, at the bench, at Khan by the anvil. He said that Chief Graham had sent him to find out how long they would be staying here. Markel replied that they weren't leaving yet. The boy nodded. He turned to leave. Stopped. Sniffed the air. Asked what it smelled like. Nola was grilling fish on a flat rock. Markel said it was fish. The boy swallowed. Daniel walked over, told him to sit down and eat. The boy hesitated. Then he sat down. Nola placed a piece of fish on a burdock leaf for him. The boy ate it in a minute. Then he wiped his mouth and said there was no blacksmith in their village. There used to be one. He went north, to the front. He didn't come back. And they need one. The plows are dull. The knives are dull. The hinges are broken. The locks are rusted. The village was slowly falling apart without a blacksmith. Daniel and Markel exchanged glances. The boy swam back. That evening, Daniel gathered everyone around the fire. He said they had what Havencross didn't. A blacksmith, a carpenter, a hunter. They needed what the camp didn't have. Food, seeds, a place in the market, trade. Not a request, not a favor. Trade. Markel nodded. Khan said he would forge. Bren said he would build. On the 16th day, Daniel crossed the ford, alone, waist deep in cold water. 2 guards were waiting for him on the other side. They led him to the chieftain. Graham turned out to be a man of about 50, heavy-set, with a red face, a first-rate merchant. He looked at Daniel with the expression one gives a fly that has returned for some reason after being shooed away. Daniel told him 3 things. First, they have a blacksmith, and he's willing to work for food and seeds. Second, they have a carpenter, and he's willing to repair anything in exchange for materials. Third, they have a hunter, and he's willing to share the spoils for a spot to trade at the market. Graham listened. Then he asked what the tent maker could do. Daniel replied that the tent maker could pack up his camp and leave at any moment, with all the craftsmen. Graham stopped smiling. He understood. It wasn't a request. It was an offer, one that could be refused. But then the plows would remain blunt and the hinges broken. Graham thought for a minute. Then he held out his hand. He said the blacksmith could come at dawn and leave at dusk. Payment in food. A sack of grain for 10 horseshoes. A chicken for every 5 tools repaired. Daniel shook his hand. He returned to camp across the ford, wet to the waist. Markel was waiting on the bank. Daniel said one word. It was a deal. Con began going to Haven Cross every day. He crossed over in the boat that Bren had repaired. He took orders. He forged. He returned in the evening with food. Gareth grabbed the first sack of barley like a child grabs a gift. He ran to his garden beds. He buried the grain. He watered them from the river. He talked to the earth. 3 days later, sprouts appeared. A week later, the garden beds were green. Gareth stood over them and smiled as if something very important had been returned to him. Bren wasn't sitting idle either. On one leg with a crutch, he thoroughly repaired the boat. He patched the cracks. He straightened the sides. Then he started fixing things around the village. A fence at one house, a porch at another. At first, the residents of Haven Cross looked at him askance. A refugee, one-legged, a trash camp across the river. But Bren worked silently and skillfully. His porch didn't creak. His fence stood straight. People started saying hello. On the 20th day, something happened. Daniel was sitting by his tent in the evening, tallying up his experience points. 52 points. 70 to reach level 3. Slow, but steady. Nola approached him. She said she needed to talk. Daniel nodded. Nola sat down next to him. She said she wasn't just a farmer. Before she got married, she was a cook at a tavern in Braunwood. A decent cook. Not trashy, not fancy, just average. She knew how to cook. For real. Not just whip up some soup. She cooked so well that people came from neighboring villages. But when she married Gareth, she quit. He didn't want his wife working in a tavern. Daniel listened. Nola said she wanted to cook. For the camp. For everyone. If Daniel built her a kitchen, she'd feed everyone. Not with 3-berry soup. With real food. Daniel looked at the panel. 1 living tent. 1 medical tent. A maximum of 2 at a time. A 3rd was needed for the kitchen. He didn't have a 3rd, but he was 18 experience points away from level 3. He told Nola he couldn't yet, but he would soon. Nola nodded. She said she'd wait. On the evening of the 21st day, Lily came to Daniel, with a doll. She reminded him that he had promised a little house. Daniel hadn't forgotten. He spent an hour that evening. He asked Bren for some wood scraps. Bren gave them to him. Daniel carved a small box with a knife, a roof made of bark, a door made of a thin sliver of wood on a leather hinge, a window, a square hole in the wall, small, crooked, but with a door and a window, just like Lily had asked. Lily took the little house. She put the doll inside. The doll didn't fit. Her legs stuck out. Lily thought for a moment. Then she laid the house on its side. Now the doll fit. Lily said the doll was saying thank you. Daniel replied that he'd say hello. Alice watched from the tent. There was something on her face. Not a smile, not tears, something in between. That night she went up to Daniel, quietly. Everyone was asleep. She said that Lily needed a father. Not a substitute, not a guardian, a father. Daniel said nothing. Alice said she knew how that sounded. They'd known each other for 3 weeks. She was a wounded woman who could barely stand on her own 2 feet. He was a stranger from nowhere. But Lily had chosen him. Children aren't wrong about these things. Daniel said he was a tent maker, not a knight, not a mage, not a lord. A level 2 tent maker. He had nothing but 2 tents. Alice replied that he had something better, a daughter who waited for him every morning at the entrance. Daniel lay awake until dawn, thinking, not about tents, not about levels, about the little girl with the rag doll who sits down next to him every evening and silently rests her head on his shoulder. On the 23rd day, the panel flashed. Level 3, new ability, camp connectivity. Tents placed next to each other can be connected by walkways. A shared system, shared heat, shared lighting. 3 active tents at a time. 3 tents. Daniel rolled up both old ones, unrolled 3 new ones, living quarters, medical, and he made the 3rd one the kitchen. He thought about Nola, about how she cuts vegetables quickly and precisely, about how she tastes them with the tip of her tongue, about how she's left-handed, just like Khan, about how she needs a wide work surface and good lighting and a range hood so the smoke doesn't sting her eyes. The tent went up between the living and medical areas. Inside stood a stone stove with 2 burners, a work table at the right height, shelves for supplies, hooks for ladles and spoons, an exhaust vent in the roof with a damper, and passageways. The 3 tents were connected by corridors. You could walk from the living quarters to the medical tent, and from the medical tent to the kitchen without going outside. The camp was no longer a collection of separate tents. It had become a single space. Nola walked into the kitchen tent. She stopped. She ran her hand over the table, over the stove. She touched the hooks, turned to Daniel. Her eyes were wet. She said one word, "Perfect," and she went to cook. That evening, the camp ate hot porridge with fish and herbs. Not just a few bites, full bowls. Nola cooked with what was available, and it was wonderful. The children ate and asked for seconds. Alice ate while sitting. Bren ate with an appetite he hadn't had in 3 weeks. Khan ate in silence, and then said he hadn't eaten porridge like this since his wife died. On the other side of the river, a Haven Cross guard stood on the bridge and sniffed the air. The smell of hot food drifted across the water. It smelled worse in the settlement. Much worse. Because the settlement had no cook. There was food. There were supplies. There was no one who could turn grain and fish into something that made you want to live. On the 24th day, 2 people from Haven Cross came to the camp. Not guards, ordinary residents, a man and a woman. They asked if they could buy food. Nola looked at Daniel. Daniel said there was nothing to sell, but if they brought the ingredients, Nola would cook. For free. They brought a sack of turnips and a bundle of dried fish. Nola made a casserole. They left with a pot of casserole and the look on their faces that people usually have after a religious epiphany the next day. 4 people came. Then 7. Then the village elder, Graham. In person. He sat down on Brenna's bench, tried Nola's stew. He was silent for a long time. Then he asked Daniel how much he wanted for his cook to work in the settlement. Daniel replied that Nola wasn't going anywhere. She was part of the camp. Graham nodded. Then he said there was a plot of land across the river, on the south bank. Good soil, level ground, near a ford. The crossing took half a day. 21 people. A cart with Bren, bundles of tents, Khan's tools, bags of supplies. Gareth carried his seedlings wrapped in a wet rag. Nola carried the pots. Lily carried a doll and a dollhouse. The ford was shallow, but the current was strong. Daniel guided people across in pairs. He held their hands. He stood waist-deep in the water and passed them from one bank to the other. Markel stood in the middle of the ford like a pillar. The children clung to him. He didn't waver once. By noon, everyone was on the south bank, wet, cold, but they were there. The spot was good, a flat clearing by the river, a forest to the right, a trail to Haven Cross to the left, a 20-minute walk to the village, close enough for trade, far enough for their own space. Daniel set up the tents, 3 of them, a living tent, a medical tent, a kitchen tent. He connected them with walkways. The residents of Havencross came to watch. About 15 people. They stood on the trail and watched as tents sprang up out of nowhere on the trampled ground. How they were connected by corridors. How people walked in and came out through another tent. One of the onlookers quietly said it was magic. Another replied that, of course it was magic. What else could it be? A third asked what level this guy was at. No one knew the answer. Daniel didn't say anything. The first night in the new place was quiet. No howling, no footsteps in the woods. The river murmured. A dog barked in Havencross. Ordinary sounds. Peaceful. Lily fell asleep first, with her doll, with her little house next to her on the floor. Alice tucked her in and lay down beside her. Daniel walked around the camp, checked the tents, checked the passageways, went outside. He sat on Brenna's bench. He looked at the stars. Different constellations, not a single familiar one. No Big Dipper, no Orion. A different sky, a different world. 25 days. He's been here 25 days. Morning brought work. Han went to Havencross to forge. Bren hobbled after him to repair. Markel went into the woods with 2 knives to hunt. Gareth was digging up a new plot, bigger than the old camp, 3 times as big. The soil was really good, soft, black, rich. Nola lit a fire in the kitchen tent and started cooking. By noon, the first residents of Havencross arrived with groceries. They brought carrots and onions. Nola made soup. They left with a pot of soup and a promise to come back tomorrow. The camp was running, like a machine. Everyone knew their place. Everyone did what they knew how to do. Daniel stood in the center and thought that this was good. It was right, but it wasn't enough. On the 26th day, new people arrived, 5 of them, a family with 3 children, from the village of Sunderfield. 2 weeks on the road, hungry, tired. The youngest child could barely walk. They were led by a boy, messenger from Havencross, the redhead. He told them there was a camp across the river. Tent dwellers. Strange, but they feed you. Daniel took them in. 26 people. The tents creaked, but they held. That evening, he went around to the new family, asked their names, asked what each of them could do. The father's name was Corvin, a farmer. The mother, Delia, a seamstress, a first-rate dressmaker. 3 children, 8, 6, and 3 years old. The youngest was 3. He was sitting in his mother's arms, looking at Daniel with serious eyes. Daniel asked Delia what kind of fabric she was used to working with. She answered, linen, wool, sometimes cotton. He asked what kind of machine she used. Delia didn't understand. He asked what tools she used. A needle and thimble, scissors if she had them, a wool-working loom if she had one. Daniel took note. In the morning, he rearranged the living tent. He added a corner for Delia, a sewing corner, a table of the right height, a hook for the fabric, lighting coming from above and to the left because Delia is right-handed, and the shadow from her hand shouldn't fall on the seam. A small cushion for needles, thread on a spool. The tent provided the thread. From where? Daniel didn't know. The system responded to care. The more precisely he understood a person's needs, the more the tent provided. Delia walked into her corner. She stopped. She touched the table. She touched the thread. She turned to Daniel. She asked how he knew how it should be done. Daniel replied that he had asked. Delia shook her head. She said that in 15 years of sewing, not a single customer had ever asked her if it was comfortable or not. Everyone just told her what to sew. No one asked how she sewed. She sat down at the table. An hour later, the first patch was sewn onto Markel's torn shirt, evenly, neatly, so that the seam was almost invisible. Markel put on the shirt. He looked at it. He said it was better than a new one. On the 28th day, the camp numbered 31 people. 5 more had arrived, 2 men and 3 women, former employees of the inn that the bandits had burned down. A cook, a stable hand, 2 maids, a laundress. All of them were trash or low level. The cook was 5th level. The stable hand was 3rd level. The maids had no level at all. The laundress was 2nd level. Daniel accepted them all. The cook joined Nola in the kitchen. 2 cooks are better than 1. The stable hand. There were no horses, but the stable hand knew animals, any kind. Markel said that hunting would be easier with the stable hand. The animals weren't afraid of him. The maids knew how to wash and clean. For the first time, the tents were clean, truly clean. Daniel hadn't thought about it before. Now he saw the difference. Clean floors, made-up beds, folded clothes, order. Such a small thing, and so important. A laundress named Edda received a trough planed by Bren from Delia and began washing for everyone. 31 people in clean clothes, for the first time in a month. People walked around sniffing their shirts. Lily sniffed her jacket and laughed. Daniel stood in the center of the camp and watched. 31 people, 3 tents, a blacksmith, a carpenter, a hunter, 2 cooks, a seamstress, a stable hand, maids, a laundress, 2 farmers, children, the wounded, families. A month ago, he was alone, with a dead panel and a skill that made him want to cry. Now he had a camp. Small, shaky, dependent on a single sack of grain and 3 fish. But a camp, with people, with work, with the smell of hot food, with children's laughter. On the morning of the 30th day, everything changed. Markel returned from the hunt early, without a catch. His face was hard. He called Daniel aside. He said quietly that 2 bodies lay on the road out of the forest, fresh, killed not by a beast, by people. Stab wounds, robbed, clothes stripped off, shoes taken. Bandits. Daniel felt a chill run from the back of his neck to his lower back. Bandits nearby, near the camp, near 31 people, of whom only 4 can fight. Markel, 2 of his former lookouts, and Caitlin. No, Caitlin hasn't arrived yet. 3 fighters, for the whole camp. Markel said that judging by the tracks, the gang has about 10 men, maybe 15, armed, roaming the area, robbing refugees on the roads. Sooner or later they'll spot the camp. They'll spot the tents. They'll see there's food and people here. And they'll come. Daniel asked what to do. Markel looked at him, said there were 2 options. First, pack up and leave, right now. Second, prepare to defend. Daniel thought. Packing up meant abandoning everything they'd built. Gareth's garden beds, trade with Havencross, a place that had almost become home. Preparing to defend meant someone might die. 3 fighters against 15 bandits. Bad odds. He asked Markel if there was a third option. Markel said no. Daniel looked at the camp, at the tents, at the children playing by the river, at Lily, who was sitting on Brenna's bench, combing a doll's hair. He said there was a third option. Markel raised an eyebrow. Daniel said the tents could be packed up in 15 minutes, set up again in 20. That meant they didn't have to choose between fleeing and defending. They could do both. If the bandits came, the camp would be packed up and moved, across the river, to the old spot, or further, anywhere. The bandits would come and find an empty clearing. No tents, no people, no food, nothing. Markel was silent. Then he nodded slowly. He said it might work. But we need a warning system. Someone has to stand guard, to spot the bandits before they spot the camp. Time to get ready. At least half an hour between the signal and the gang's arrival. Daniel nodded. Markel organized the lookouts, 2 of his men taking turns, 4 shifts, day and night. A rope from the post on the trail to the camp. If it's tugged 3 times, it means danger. The camp practiced. Daniel announced there would be drills. He didn't explain why. He didn't want to scare the children. He just said they needed to be able to pack up quickly. Like a game. Whoever packs up first. The children took it as enthusiasm. The adults understood. Twice a day, morning and evening, Daniel gave the signal. Everyone ran to the tents. They gathered their things. Daniel took down the tents. He timed it. First attempt, 40 minutes. Too long. Second, 35. Third, 28. A week later, we were packing up in 20 minutes. Everyone knew their role. Gareth gathered the tools. Nola stacked the dishes. Khan grabbed the hammer. Delia folded the fabrics. The kids ran to Lily, because Lily where to stand and who to follow. Markel covered their backs. Bren was on the cart. Corvin pulled the cart. A mechanism. Well coordinated. Fast. Daniel watched this, and for the first time thought of a word that had never crossed his mind before. Community. Not a camp, not a settlement, not a group of survivors. A community. People who know each other, who work for each other, who are ready to run for each other. On the 35th day, the raiders came, at night. Markel heard them first. Even before the rope tugged, he woke up to the smell. Unwashed bodies, skin, metal. He tugged the rope 3 times. The camp woke up, quietly. No screams, no panic. The children got up. Lily lifted the younger ones. Alice helped Brenna onto the cart. Gareth grabbed the bags. Nola packed up the pots. Khan stood with a hammer at the entrance. Daniel was taking down the tents. One by one. The living quarters, the kitchen, the medical tent. 3 bundles on his back. 31 people moved toward the ford in the darkness. Markel, with 2 lookouts, walked behind. He brought up the rear. The bandits emerged onto the clearing 20 minutes after the last person entered the water. Daniel heard them from the other bank. Cursing. Shouts. They found an empty clearing, an extinguished campfire, trampled grass, and nothing else. No tents, no people, no food. One of the bandits roared with rage. Another kicked Brenna's bench. They hadn't had time to take the bench. Daniel stood knee-deep in the water on that bank. Lily was beside him, wet, shivering, but quiet. All 31 of them stood on the north bank, wet, in the darkness, alive, everyone. Daniel set up the tents, in the old spot, by the chapel, where they had left 2 weeks ago. The tents were up in 20 minutes. People went inside. Warm walls, dry mattresses. The kitchen was running. Nola put the kettle on. The children fell asleep in 10 minutes. Alice put Lily to bed. She walked over to Daniel. She said quietly that he had saved them. Daniel shook his head. He said they had saved themselves. He had only pitched the tents. They had done everything else. Alice smiled. For the first time in a month. A wide, repid, truly. She said that was exactly what he did. He packs up the tents, and people are saved. Markel was sitting by the fire. Daniel sat down next to him. Markel said that in 10 years of service, he'd seen armies flee from the enemy, abandoning their supply trains, leaving the wounded behind, losing people. But 31 people, including children and a one-legged carpenter, packed up in 20 minutes and didn't lose a single person. They didn't even forget the pots. He paused. Then he said that these weren't just tents. It was something else. Daniel asked what. Markel said he didn't know the word, but when he found it, he'd tell him. In the morning, a red-haired boy from Havencross came to the camp on the North Shore with news. A patrol from a nearby garrison had tracked down the bandits. They'd caught 5. The rest had scattered. The clearing was clear. They could return. Daniel nodded. By noon, the camp was back on the south bank, in its place. Brenna's bench was still standing. A bandit had kicked it, but hadn't broken it. Brenna chuckled. He said it was a good bench. Lily sat down on it. She put her doll next to her. They hadn't lost the dollhouse either. Daniel looked at the camp, at the people, at the tents, at the river, at Havencross beyond the trees. 31 people. 3 tents. Morning of the 36th day. Daniel stood on the bank and looked at the path out of the forest. A woman was walking along it. Alone. No bag, no companions. A military bearing. Short hair. A scar on her neck from her ear to her collarbone. She walked steadily. She wasn't in a hurry. She didn't look back. She walked the way people walk who are used to the fact that what lies behind them is worse than what lies ahead. Markel saw her first. He stood up. He put his hand on his knife. Then he took it away. He said quietly that she wasn't dangerous. Or rather, she was dangerous, but not for them. The woman approached the camp. She stopped. She looked at the tents, the paths between them, Brenna's bench, Gareth's garden beds, the children by the river. She looked at Daniel. She asked who was in charge here. Daniel said it was him. She asked what grade he was in. He answered, "Tentsman." She didn't laugh, didn't even smile. She nodded, said she'd heard of him in Havencross, the tentsman who feeds the settlement and packs up camp in 20 minutes. She introduced herself. Sarah Lee, 26 years old, former military medic in the Westmark Northern Army. Class, field healer, deserter. Daniel asked why she left. Sarah answered briefly. She was ordered to leave the field hospital along with the wounded, 53 people. Command decided that evacuation was an irrational waste of resources. She refused. She was arrested. She escaped. She walked south for 6 months. She ate whatever she could find. She treated people on the roads in exchange for food. 3 times she nearly got caught by patrols. She came here because she had nowhere else to go. Daniel listened. Then he asked one thing. Did she want to stay or just spend the night? Sarah looked at him for a long moment. She said it depended on what she saw. Daniel nodded. He led her through the camp. He showed her the living tent, the kitchen tent. He took her to the medical tent. Sarah stepped inside. She paused. She surveyed the space. 4 cots, a shelf with clean cloth, warm air, a clean floor. Bren was lying on his cot, a stump of a leg and a clean bandage. Sarah walked over to him, without asking. She unwound the bandage. She looked. Bren flinched. She placed her palm on his knee. Her hand glowed, a soft greenish light. Bren froze. Sarah held her hand there for a minute. 2. She removed it. The stump looked different. The redness was gone, the swelling had subsided. The edges of the wound had drawn together. They hadn't healed, but they had drawn together. In 2 minutes, she had done more than a healer in a month. Daniel stood at the entrance and watched. A healer. A real healer. With a combat class. With experience in field surgery. With hands that glow and heal. She turned to him, said the tent was nice, clean, warm, the right temperature for healing. But the layout of the beds was awkward. The serious cases should be closer to the entrance. The instruments should be arranged differently. The shelf was too high. She needed it lower. And a separate corner for the seriously injured, with a partition, so the others wouldn't see and get scared. Daniel listened and took it all in. Every word, every detail. Sarah spoke quickly and precisely, like someone who's used to not being listened to and therefore hurries to get the main point across. Daniel said he would remodel the tent. Today. To suit her. Sarah fell silent. She looked at him. She asked what he meant by for her. Daniel explained. His skill works better when he builds for a specific person. The better he knows how a person works, the better the tent turns out. He needs to know her habits, where she puts her tools, how she moves between patients, which hand she uses, what position is comfortable for her when examining a wounded person, where she sleeps. Yes, where she sleeps. Because a healer who doesn't get enough sleep heals worse. Sarah looked at him, silently, for a long time. Then she said she preferred to sleep in the same room where the patients lay, so she could hear if anyone got sick at night, but not right next to them, in the corner, so she could see everyone without getting up. The bed is hard. She's used to field conditions. She doesn't like soft beds. The instruments are to the right of the bed. She's right-handed. She needs to be able to reach them without looking. And the light. She needs a light above the work table, but a soft one above the beds. The patients need dim lighting. They need to sleep. Bright light gets in the way. Daniel listened and nodded. He folded up the medical tent. They carried Brenna out in their arms. He grumbled, but endured it. Daniel closed his eyes. He thought of Sarah, of her hands, of the scar on her neck, of how she moved through the tent, confidently, precisely, not a single wasted step. Every gesture was measured. Habit, years in the field. The skill kicked in. The medical tent was set up again. Inside, everything was different. The cots were closer to the entrance, a serious case behind the partition, a work table with a bright light, soft twilight over the patients, a hard bed in the far corner, a shelf for instruments nearby, within arm's reach. From the bed, she could see all the cots, every single one. Sarah walked in. She slowly walked around the tent. She touched the desk. She touched the shelf. She lay down on the bed. She checked. She reached for the shelf without looking. She reached it. She looked at the cots, all visible. She stood up. She walked over to Daniel. She said quietly that this was the best field hospital she had ever worked in. Better than the Northern Army of Westmark with a budget of 50,000 gold. Daniel said it was just a tent. Sarah shook her head. She said no, not just. And she called him Dan, for the first time. Not sir, not tent maker. Dan. She stayed. She worked from day one. Under her care, Bren recovered rapidly. 3 days later, he was walking without a crutch. His leg hadn't grown back, but the stump had healed completely. Sarah made him a prosthesis out of wood and leather. Rough, but Bren could walk. Slowly, with a limp, but walk. He stood on 2 legs for the first time in 6 weeks. One of his own, one wooden. He stood and was silent. Then he went to the workbench. He took his tools. He began to build. A chair. A normal chair with 4 legs. The first piece of furniture not from a tent, but made of wood, with his own hands. A week after Sarah's arrival, the camp had changed. Not physically, internally. People stopped being afraid. Before, every cough, every scratch, every pain caused a quiet panic. What if he gets sick? What if the wound gets infected? What if the child takes to his bed? Now there was Sarah, with her glowing hands, with her dry voice, with her habit of grumbling at patients who didn't listen. She grumbled at Khan when he worked on his sore knees. She grumbled at Markel when he came back from hunting with scraped hands and didn't show her. She grumbled at Gareth when he caught a cold and kept digging. People grumbled back. They obeyed, and they felt safe, because someone was grumbling about them. Someone cared. On the 42nd day, Alice took a turn for the worse. Suddenly. She was fine in the morning. By noon, she collapsed. Fever, delirium. The wound on her side, which seemed to have healed, had burst open from the inside. Sarah examined her. Her face went stiff. She told Daniel quietly that it was an internal abscess. The infection was deeper than it seemed. Pus had accumulated inside. She needed surgery. Here. Now. Without anesthesia because there wasn't any. Without an assistant because no one knew how. Daniel said he would be the assistant. Sarah looked at him. She asked if he had ever seen an open wound. Daniel said no. Sarah told him not to faint. He didn't. He stood by her side for 2 hours, handing her instruments, holding the cloth, wiping away the blood. Alice screamed as Sarah cut. Then she fell silent. She lost consciousness. That was worse. The silence of a wounded person is worse than a scream. Sarah worked. Her hands were covered in blood. Her face was like a mask. The green light from her palms mingled with the red. She found an abscess. She cut it open, cleaned it out, stitched it up. She kept the light on the wound for another hour after she finished. Daniel sat nearby. He didn't leave. Lily stood behind the partition. They wouldn't let her in. She stood there and said nothing. Nola held her by the shoulders. By evening, Alice was breathing evenly. The fever had broken. Sarah said she would live, but she was weak, very weak. Months of recovery. Daniel stepped out of the medical tent. Lily rushed to him, clung to him, silently. He lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light for a 10-year-old. He held her and thought that this girl had almost lost her mother twice already, and both times her mother had survived, and both times because there happened to be shelter nearby. The first time, a tent. The second time, a tent and the healer who worked in that tent. That night, Sarah sat by Alice's bed. Daniel brought her tea. Herbal. Nola had brewed it. Sarah took the cup. Her hands were shaking. She noticed that Daniel had noticed. She told him not to look. Daniel sat down beside her, silently. Sarah drank her tea. Then she said quietly that there were 53 people. That's how many were in the hospital she had left behind. On orders. She left. They stayed. She doesn't know what happened to them. She knows, but she doesn't want to know. Daniel didn't say anything. He just sat there. Sarah finished her tea. She set the cup down. She said that Alice wasn't one of them. She wouldn't leave Alice behind. Not Alice. Not Brenna. Not anyone from this camp. Daniel nodded. He said he knew. Sarah looked at him. She said quietly that she used to not believe people who said they knew. Now she believes. Because he built her a tent with a shelf for her tools within arm's reach. People who don't understand don't do things like that. On the 45th day, 7 more people arrived at the camp, refugees from 2 villages to the north. The rumor was spreading. People on the roads were saying there was a camp at Haven Cross. Tent dwellers. They feed you. They treat you. They don't chase you away. 38 people. 3 tents. Daniel felt he'd reached his limit. The walls were thinner, the heat was weaker, the mattresses were harder. His skill was stretching, but not infinitely. Level 4 was still far off. Experience, 89. He sat at the panel at night and counted. Sarah approached. She asked what he was counting. Daniel explained. Levels, experience, tents. The higher the level, the more tents, the more people. But experience comes slowly. Sarah asked what experience depended on. Daniel answered, on care. Every time he does something for a specific person, the system counts it. Every tent for a specific resident. Every blanket of the right thickness. Every chair of the right height. Sarah was silent. Then she said one thing. This was the strangest class she'd encountered in 10 years, and the most human. Daniel didn't know how to respond. On the 48th day, the camp changed, not quantitatively, qualitatively. Khan wasn't just forging for Haven Cross. Customers from 2 neighboring villages came to him. Word of a good blacksmith had spread. Bren built furniture, real furniture, chairs, tables, shelves. He sold it in Haven Cross. Nola fed half the village. Her kitchen became a place where people came not only for food, but also for warmth, to sit, to talk, to have a hot drink. Delia sewed. Orders for clothes came in non-stop. Gareth grew vegetables. They harvested their first crop of barley on the 40th day. Small, but it was theirs. Markel hunted and trained 2 of the new arrivals. Young guys, not fighters, but after 2 weeks with Markel, they could at least hold a knife properly. The system counted it all. Experience grew. 91, 95, 98. Every day, little by little, but every day. On the 50th day, Daniel stood by the river at dawn. 2 months. He'd been in this world for 2 months. 38 people behind him, 3 tents, a blacksmith, a carpenter, a hunter, a healer, 2 cooks, a seamstress, a stable hand, farmers, children, and an engineer from Colorado who sets up the tents. New figures appeared on the road from the forest. 5, 10, 15. A long column, exhausted faces, tattered clothes, children carried in the arms of adults, refugees, many, more than ever before. Markel approached. He said quietly that they were from Gryfield, a large village in the north. 300 residents. There used to be 300. The beast passed through a week ago. Those who survived are fleeing. Daniel looked at the column. He counted. 30, 40, 50, 60 people. He had 3 tents for 38. Where would he put 60? He looked at the panel. Level 3, experience 102. 18 points to level 4. Not enough. Not now. Not today. He turned to Markel, said one thing. We'll take everyone. Markel looked at him, asked where. Daniel said he'd figure it out. The column approached the camp. People were falling onto the grass. Children were crying. The wounded were moaning. Sarah came out of the medical tent. She looked around. Her face turned to stone. Many wounded. Many. She turned and went back inside. A minute later, she came out with clean cloths and instruments. She began working right there on the grass, under the open sky. Daniel stood and looked at nearly 100 people in the clearing by the river. 100. 3 tenths. He closed his eyes, opened the panel. 102 units, 18 to the next level. But he didn't need the level tomorrow, now. He approached the first wounded man, an elderly man, a burn on his arm. Daniel asked his name. The man replied through clenched teeth. Alden. Daniel asked what hurt the most. Alden said his arm. And his back. An old injury. 20 years. Lower back. Daniel made a mental note. He moved on to the next one. Woman. Young. Bruised leg. Can't walk. Name. Fiora. Nursing mother. Baby is 2 months old. She needs warmth and silence. The baby only sleeps in silence. Daniel remembered. Next. 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 He went through 60 people in 3 hours. Each one. Name, pain, habit, need. 60 stories in 3 hours. His head was buzzing, but he remembered. Each one. The panel flashed. Experience 108, then 112, then 116. The system was counting. He didn't build a tent. He just listened, just asked, just remembered. And the system counted it as care. 118, 119, 120. Level 4. New skill. Inner space greater than outer space. Level 1. A tent the size of a marquee holds a 2-room house inside. 4 active tents at once. Daniel stood up. His hands were shaking. His head was spinning. He went around 60 people and gained a level. Through care, through attention, through names. He set up the 4th tent, a big one. He thought of all 60, every single one, and the tent grew. From the outside, a canopy, 5 by 5 meters. Inside, a house. A real one. 2 stories. The first floor is a common hall with couches. The second floor is bedrooms, small, but separate. For families. For the wounded. For a nursing mother who needs quiet. Alden got a cot with a firm support under his lower back. Fiora got a room on the 2nd floor. Quiet. Warm. Separate. The camp changed overnight. 4 tents, almost 100 people, and a rumor that spread along the roads faster than any messenger. There's a tent camp at Haven Cross. You walk into a tent, and inside it's a house. They treat you for free. They feed you. They don't ask where you're from. They don't ask what class you are. They take everyone. On the 53rd day, 20 more people arrived. On the 55th, 15. On the 58th, 10. Every day, someone stood on the path coming out of the forest, dirty, hungry, with eyes in which there was just enough hope left to make it there. Daniel took everyone in. He went around to each one in the evening. He asked questions. He memorized their details. He rearranged the tents. The system provided experience, slowly but steadily. On the 63rd day, there were 120 of them. Daniel stood in the center of the camp and for the first time felt he couldn't handle it. Not physically. He was healthy. The skill worked. The tents were standing. The problem lay elsewhere. He couldn't make the rounds to all 120 people in one evening. He couldn't remember everyone. He couldn't make every sleeping area fit a specific occupant. The tents for those he knew personally were perfect. The tents for those he knew by name were good. The tents for those he hadn't had time to get to know were just tents. Functional, warm, but impersonal. and he felt the difference. The system felt the difference. Progress with the impersonal tense was half as fast. On the evening of the 60th day, he sat alone by the fire, tired, truly tired for the first time. Not from the work, from the people, from the impossibility of giving everyone what they deserved. Sarah approached. She sat down beside him. She had learned to be silent beside him, to wait until he spoke first. He spoke. He said he couldn't handle it. 120 people, and he was alone. He couldn't know everyone. He couldn't build for everyone. His skill required personal contact. It required knowledge. It required care. And care doesn't scale. Sarah listened. Then she said one thing. She said she didn't need to treat everyone personally. She had taught Nola how to dress wounds. She had taught one of the new arrivals how to clean wounds. She had taught Delia how to prepare herbal compresses. Her hands were still needed for the serious cases, but the minor cases are handled by others. Daniel looked at her. She said something else. She said that maybe care could be delegated too. Maybe Daniel didn't need to know everyone personally. Maybe he needed to teach others to see people the way he does. Daniel thought about it all night. In the morning, he gathered 5 people: Nola, Gareth, Delia, Markel, and Corvin. He told them he needed help, not with the tents, with the people. He couldn't get to everyone. He needed eyes and ears, people who would talk to the new arrivals, ask their names, learn their habits, write down what each person needed, and bring it to him. Not general lists, specific details. Alden has a bad back and needs a firm mattress. Fiora's baby only sleeps in silence. The blacksmith from Greyfield is blind in his left eye and needs light on his right. Things like that. The 5 of them looked at him. Nola was the first to nod. She said she talks to people in the kitchen like that anyway, every day. They come to eat and tell their stories. She just has to write it down. Gareth said he could do it. He was used to working alongside people in the garden beds. They talk, and he listens. Delia said the same thing. Markel grunted. He said he wasn't much of a talker, but on guard duty people get nervous and chatter. He can listen. Corvin nodded silently. That's how the first unit came to be. 5 people who gathered information about the camp's residents. Every evening they came to Daniel. They told him. Alden complained today about a draft at his feet. The boy from the 3rd tent is afraid of the dark. He needs a nightlight. The woman with a burn on her shoulder can't sleep on her right side. Daniel listened. He memorized it. At night, he rearranged the tents. Not all at once, piece by piece. He changed a detail here, a detail there, a mat for Alden, a nightlight for the boy, a pillow under the left shoulder for the woman with the burn. The system responded. Progress was being made, slower than when he did everything himself, but progress was being made. On the 65th day, a clash occurred. Among the refugees from Greyfield was a man named Thorvin, a former sergeant in the Northern Army, strong, loud, a 6th-level infantryman with class. He was used to giving orders, used to being listened to, and he didn't like that the camp was run by a tent maker. Trash class. No combat skills, no military experience. Torvin started quietly. First he grumbled by the fire. Then he grumbled louder. Then he started speaking openly. He said that the camp needed a real leader, a fighter, someone who could protect them, not just set up tents. He said Daniel was a weakling who hid behind a tarp. The camp needed a real leader, a fighter, someone who could defend them, not just set up tents. He said that Daniel was a weakling who hid behind a tarp, that at the first real threat, he'd run away and abandon everyone. Some listened, especially the new arrivals who hadn't seen how the camp had been dismantled in 20 minutes by bandits who didn't know the history. To them, Daniel was just a guy with a ridiculous class. Markel came to Daniel that evening. He said Torvin was stirring things up. We need to sort this out, now, before things got worse. Daniel asked what Markel suggested. Markel said it straight out. Call Torvin out. Confront him in front of everyone. Settle things. Or drive him out. Daniel shook his head. He said he wouldn't drive him out. Torvin had come for help. He would get it. Markel said Torvin had come for power. Daniel replied that maybe so. But there was no room for banishment in his tents. Only for a conversation. He went to Torvin, found him by the fire, with 5 men from Greyfield. They fell silent when Daniel approached. Daniel sat down across from him. He looked at Torvin. He said he'd heard his words. He said he agreed. The camp needed protection, a battle leader, someone who understood defense and tactics. Torvin wasn't expecting this. He narrowed his eyes. Daniel continued. He said that Markel was a good hunter and scout, but he wasn't a commander. He's a squad leader. He needs someone above him, someone with experience, someone like Torvin. Torvin was silent. Daniel said he had a proposal. Torvin would take charge of camp security, organize patrols, train the men, be responsible for safety. Complete freedom in his area. One condition. The decision to leave or stay is Daniel's, because only he can pack up the tents. Torvin thought for a moment. Then he asked, what if he didn't agree with the decision to leave? Daniel replied calmly, then they'd talk it over. And if Torvin was right, they'd stay. And if Daniel was right, they'd leave. Because the dead won't appreciate being right. Torvin looked at him. Then he smiled. Not maliciously. It resembled respect. He said, all right. He held out his hand. Daniel shook it. Markel stood in the shadows and watched. Then he walked over to Daniel. He said quietly that he had found the word, the one he'd been searching for since that night with the bandits. The word was chief. Daniel grimaced. He said he wasn't a chief, he was an engineer. Markel shrugged. He said that an engineer who settles disputes without bloodshed and takes in 60 people in a single night is a chieftain, whether he wants to be or not. On the 70th day, the camp was buzzing. Rumors were spreading throughout the region. Torvin organized patrols. 4 shifts, 8 men. Markel taught the young men to hunt. Khan forged weapons, not swords, knives, axes, spearheads. Simple, but reliable. Bren built. Not furniture this time. Carts. Stretchers. Frames for carrying loads. The camp was preparing. For what exactly, no one knew. But it was preparing. Sarah trained 2 assistants. A young woman from Greyfield with a first-level herbalist class. A trashy class. But Sarah said that an herbalist isn't trash. It's the foundation. Herbs heal when magic runs out. The second assistant was Old Man Alden, a former apothecary. He knew the names of 40 medicinal plants, not by the system, by life experience. His hands remembered how to grind ointments. Sarah gave him work. He stopped complaining about his lower back. Daniel noticed this. He noticed that a man who has a purpose stops feeling pain so acutely. Not because the pain goes away, because something stronger than pain appears. Meaning. On the 72nd day, the panel flashed. Level 5. New abilities. Advanced environmental adaptation. The tents adapt not only to the climate, but also to the threats of the terrain. Near the territory of darkness, the walls thicken and security contours appear. There are 5 active tents at a time. And one more, a library of schematics. Every tent configuration Daniel has ever created is saved. He can deploy any of them again, without modification, without redesigning. Just choose from the list. The list was long. A medical tent for Sarah, a blacksmith's tent for Khan, a kitchen tent for Nola, a sewing tent for Delia, a living tent for 20 people, a living tent for 40, a large communal tent with a 2-story extension. Each one remembered everyone for whom it had been created. Daniel looked at the list and thought on a grand scale for the first time. Not about a camp, about a city, a mobile city, one that could be packed up in an hour and set up in 2. One is not tied to the ground. That is not a trap. A city that leaves when the beast comes and returns when the beast leaves. He didn't say it out loud, but Sarah stood nearby and saw his face. She asked what he was thinking. Daniel answered, "About the city." Sarah raised an eyebrow. Daniel said that every city in this world is walls. Walls that don't protect. Walls that kill. People go behind the walls and die when the creature breaks them down, because they can't leave. They don't have time. They don't want to abandon their homes. But what if you could take your home with you? Sarara was silent. Then she said quietly that he was crazy, and that she was glad to be part of that madness. The 80th day. The camp had grown to 150 people. 5 tents, living quarters, medical, kitchen, workshop. Inside each one, the space was larger than outside. The residents of Haven Cross came to look at the camp as if it were a miracle. They stood on the trail, counting the tents, going inside and coming out with wide eyes. The same reaction every time. It's bigger inside. How? Why? Daniel stopped explaining. He just shrugged. Tents. On the 82nd day, what Daniel had been waiting for and fearing happened. A mounted cavalry squadron. 12 horsemen. The Westmark coat of arms on their cloaks. Heavy chainmail. Swords. Spears. The commander in a polished helmet with a plume. The tax squadron. Torvin saw them first. He ran to Daniel. He said one word. Crown. Daniel went out to the trail, the dismounted. Young, about 25. Arrogant. Clearly a fighter. He surveyed the camp with the expression one uses to look at a garbage heap. He introduced himself. Lieutenant Garrett Voss, Westmark's 7th Tax Squad. He said that under the law of the kingdom, any settlement of more than 50 souls must be registered in the royal registry, pay taxes, provide recruits for the militia, and fly the royal flag. Daniel listened. Then he asked one thing. Registered as what? Voss didn't understand. Daniel explained. It's not a settlement. It's a camp, a temporary one. It might not be here tomorrow. It can't be registered because it's not permanent. Voss frowned. He said he saw 5 tents. He saw people. He saw a smithy and a kitchen. It's a settlement. Period. Daniel looked at Markel. Markel nodded. Daniel turned to Voss. He said, "Wait." He entered the camp. He gave the signal. 30 minutes. A well-rehearsed procedure. 150 people moved like a single mechanism. Belongings into bags, children to the adults, the wounded onto stretchers. Daniel was taking down the tents, one after another, 5 bundles, on his back. 12 horsemen stood on the trail and watched as an entire settlement vanished before their eyes. The tents disappeared. The people lined up in a column. The smithy was gone. The kitchen was gone. The workshop was gone. 30 minutes later, all that remained in the clearing by the river only trampled grass and an extinguished campfire. 150 people stood in a column, ready to go, anywhere. Voss sat on his horse and said nothing. His men exchanged glances. One of the horsemen cursed under his breath. Daniel approached Voss. He said calmly, "You see? No settlement, no taxes, no recruits, We're leaving. You can claim this clearing. It's yours. We don't need it." Voss was silent for 10 seconds. Then he asked where they were going. Daniel shrugged. "To a place where we aren't taxed for having survived." Voss pulled on the reins, turned his horse around, rode off with his 12 men. Didn't say another word. Daniel waited until the dust settled. Then he turned the tents back around. In the same spot. 30 minutes to set up, 30 to take down. An hour. But there would be no taxes. The camp came back to life as if nothing had happened. Nola put the kettle on. Khan lit the horn. The children ran to the river. Bren sat down on his bench and continued planing the table leg, as if nothing had happened. Markel approached. He said this wasn't the end. Voss would return, or send someone higher up. The kingdom does not tolerate what it cannot control. Daniel nodded. He knew. But today they were free. Today was enough. On the 85th day, the panel flashed. Level 6. 6 active tents at once. The interior of a level 6 tent accommodates a small living quarters. Daniel reorganized the camp. 6 tents. Outside, 6 tents on the clearing. Inside, a small town. A residential quarter with separate rooms for families. A medical unit with an operating room and wards. A kitchen complex with 2 halls. A dining hall. A workshop quarter. Khan's smithy. Brenna's workshop. Delia's sewing room. And something new. A storage tent. With shelves. With an inventory. With a lock. Because 150 people are no longer a family where everyone trusts each other. It is a community where trust must be reinforced by order. Corvin managed the warehouse. The former farmer turned out to be a man with a flawless memory for numbers. How many sacks of grain? How many bundles of dried fish? How much fabric? How many nails? He knew everything. Without records. Daniel asked him his class. Corvin hesitated. He said quietly, "Accountant. Trash class. Knows how to count. That's it. Just counting." Daniel nodded. He said there were no trash classes in this camp. There are people who are needed, and an accountant is needed. Corvin was silent. Then he silently went to the storeroom. From that day on, not a single carrot went missing from the inventory. On the 88th day, Alice died. Quietly, in her sleep. Sarah came in the morning to check on her and found her cold. The abscess had metastasized to her internal organs. Sarah hadn't seen it. She couldn't have seen it. Her healing magic treated the tissues, but didn't detect deep lesions. She stood over the body with a stony face, her hands clenched. Daniel stood beside her. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. He thought of only one thing. Lily. Who would tell Lily? He said it, himself. He took the girl to the river, sat down on the bank. Lily sat next to him, with her doll. Daniel said that Mom had gone, at night, quietly. She didn't suffer. Lily was silent. She looked at the water, for a long time. Then she asked where she had gone. Daniel said he didn't know, but to a place where it's good. Lily asked if Daddy was there. Daniel said probably yes. Lily was silent for another minute. Then she turned to Daniel, her eyes dry. She asked, "Are you going to leave?" Daniel looked at her, at the 10-year-old girl who, in 3 months, had lost her home, lost her father, lost her mother, and she was asking the only thing that mattered to her. He said, "No, I won't leave." Lily nodded. She rested her head on his shoulder. She sat like that for an hour. She didn't cry. Then she stood up. She went into the tent. She took the dollhouse. She brought it to the river. She set it down next to her. She said that Mom had told her that as long as there was a home, everything would be all right. The doll has a house. They have tents. So it'll be all right. Daniel watched her, the girl who was comforting herself with the logic he himself had given her. A roof is already something. He said that on the first night. She remembered. Alice was buried on the hill above the river. Con forged a small cross. Bren carved a plaque. Alice Hayward, loving mother. Lily stood by the grave with the doll. She didn't cry. The whole camp stood behind her. 150 people. Silent. Sarah stood next to Daniel. He saw her biting her lip. He saw her hands, clenched so tight her knuckles had turned white. She blamed herself. That evening, Daniel did what he had promised Alice, not with words, but with his presence. He rearranged his tent, his own little room on the second floor of the living quarters. A second one appeared next to it, a small one, with a low bed, with a shelf for a doll and a dollhouse, and with a string stretched across the wall from Lily's room to Daniel's. A bell hung at its end. If she pulled it, it would ring. Lily saw the string. She touched it. She tugged on it. A bell rang in Daniel's room. He peeked in, asked what was wrong. Lily said she was just checking. He nodded, said it worked. Lily lay down, her doll beside her, the dollhouse on the shelf, the string within arm's reach. Daniel lay in his room. Through the wall, he could hear Lily breathing. Steady. Calm. She had fallen asleep. He wasn't sleeping. He lay there, thinking that now he was a father. Not a biological one, not a legal one. No one had signed any papers. No one had performed any ceremonies. But the girl behind the wall tugged on the string when she was scared, and he came. That was fatherhood. Not a piece of paper. Presence. By the 90th day, the camp was firmly established. 6 tents. 160 people. The economy was working. Khan supplied Havencross and 2 neighboring villages. Bren built to order. Nola fed everyone. Sarah healed. Delia sewed. Gareth cultivated 3 fields of barley and vegetables. Markel hunted and trained the sentries. Torvin organized a full-fledged guard, 12 people in 4 shifts. The perimeter, posts, signals. Corvin kept track of every grain. Everything worked. Almost. The problem was the chaos of everyday life. Who sleeps where? Who owes whom? Who doesn't get along with whom? Who works and who slacks off? 160 people is a small town, and a town without records is a mess. Daniel could feel it. Every day, petty conflicts. This one climbed into someone else's bed. That one ate someone else's portion. A third didn't show up for duty. A fourth thinks he works harder than anyone else but gets paid the same. Trivialities. But little things that pile up and explode. He needed someone who knew everyone. Someone who remembered who was fighting with whom, who's related to whom, who has what illness, who can't stand whom. He needed the camp's memory. He didn't yet know that this memory was already on its way to him from the forest. On the 91st day, she arrived. Quietly, without warning, a thin woman in a gray hooded robe, barefoot, mud and old calluses on her feet. She didn't follow the path. She went through the forest. She came out into a clearing. She stopped. She looked at the camp. Torvin saw her. He approached. He asked who she was and where she was from. The woman pulled back her hood. A young face, 24 years old, but her eyes were old, very old. The eyes of a person who had seen too much. She gave her name, Yuna Son, a former priestess of the Temple of Stability, excommunicated. Torvin took a step back. The Order of Stability was a name spoken softly in these parts. Temple priests, fanatics, preachers of the doctrine that only a settled life is pleasing to the gods, that nomads are heretics, that the walls are sacred. Yuna said she was no longer a priestess, excommunicated for the heresy of doubt. 6 months ago. She's been on the move ever since. Torvin brought her to Daniel. Daniel was sitting by the tent listening to Corvin report on supplies. He saw Yuna. He stood up. She looked at him. She said she knew his name, the tent keeper, a heretic according to the order. She came to the heretic because other heretics know what it's like when the world rejects you for who you are. Daniel asked what her class was. Yuna replied, Keeper of Names. Daniel asked her to explain. Yuna explained. She remembers the name and story of every person she has ever met, even just once. Everyone, without exception, forever. She cannot forget. She is physically unable to. At the temple, they used her as a living registry of the dead. Every day they brought her the relatives of the deceased. They told their stories. She memorized them. Names, stories, how they lived, how they died. Thousands of names, thousands of deaths. Every night they were all in her head, all at once, all at the same time. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think of anything but the dead. She went mad. She ran away. She was excommunicated. Now she walks, and the names follow her like shadows. Daniel listened, silently. Yuna spoke evenly, without emotion, like a person who has cried it all out and is now simply stating the facts. He asked one thing, what she needed. Yuna said she needed a place where her gift would serve the living, not the dead. Daniel nodded. He said he had 160 living people, and he didn't know half of them by name. But for her, a single glance would be enough. Yuna looked at him. For the first time during the entire conversation, something flashed in her eyes. Not hope. Not hope yet. Surprise. Daniel showed her around the camp, introduced her to the people. Yuna walked and watched in silence. Every face, every name. She didn't ask. The people introduced themselves. And she memorized. Not just the name, everything. How the person stood, how they spoke, what expression they had. In 3 hours, she had walked through the entire camp. In the evening, she came to Daniel. She said there were 162 people, not 160. He was wrong. 2 had arrived that afternoon while he was busy, a young couple from Haven Cross. They'd decided to move to the camp. Daniel didn't know. Yuna knew. She'd been in the camp for 3 hours and already knew it better than he did. But that wasn't all. She said something else. She said that in the 3rd tent, a man named Walter and a woman named Greta hadn't spoken to each other in a week. They were from different villages. His village had once traded with the bandits who burned down Greta's village. It wasn't his fault. But she knows where he's from and hates him for it. She said that Timon, the boy from the 4th tent, wets the bed every night and hides it because he's afraid they'll kick him out. He needs help, not punishment. She said that old Irma in the medical ward hasn't eaten in 2 days. Not because she's sick, because she's decided to die. She's lost everyone. Her husband, her sons, her grandchildren. She sees no point. Daniel listened. Every word was a blow. He didn't know. He didn't know about Walter and Greta. He didn't know about Timon. He didn't know about Irma. 162 people, and he didn't know that one of them had decided to die. Yuna saw it 3 hours ago, because she was watching, because her class forced her to watch, to see, to remember. Every detail, every pain, every hidden scream behind a closed door. Daniel stood up. He walked over to Irma. He found her in the corner of the medical ward, small, thin, gray. She was lying there, staring at the ceiling. Daniel sat down next to her. He asked her name. She answered, Irma. He asked what she used to like to do, before all this. Irma was silent for a long time. Then she said quietly that she baked bread. She'd baked bread her whole life, every morning, 30 years, the best bread in the village. Her grandchildren would run in before breakfast because bread fresh from the oven with butter was their favorite. Danleen listened. Then he said there was no baker at the camp. There were cooks, there was a kitchen, no baker. 162 people without fresh bread. Irma looked at him. He said that if she wanted, he would build her an oven, just for her hands, for her dough, whatever kind she wanted. Irma was silent. Then she asked why. Daniel answered, because 162 people deserve good bread, and because she is the only one who can bake it. Irma turned away toward the wall. Daniel stood up. He left. In the morning, Irma got up. She left the medical ward. She went to the kitchen tent. She asked for flour. Nola gave it to her. Irma kneaded the dough, with her hands, old hands that remembered every movement. By noon, the camp smelled of bread, real bread. People stopped, inhaled. The smell of bread from the oven is the smell of home, the smell of everything being all right. The children ran up first. Irma stood at the table and sliced the loaves. She handed out slices, hot ones, with a crispy crust. The children ate and asked for more. Irma cut more. There was something on her face. Not a smile. Not quite a smile yet. The shadow of a smile. A hint. The first in a long time. That evening, Daniel rebuilt the kitchen tent. He added a bakery, a stone oven, a wide table for dough, shelves for flour. The temperature inside was even, warm, just right for Irma. Suited to her height, suited to her arms, suited to her habit of placing the dough on the left and the finished bread on the right. Irma walked into the bakery. She stood there for a long time. She touched the oven. She touched the table. Then she turned to Daniel. She said quietly that her grandchildren loved bread with cinnamon. Daniel said that Mira would find some cinnamon. Irma nodded. She went back to the dough. From that day on, the camp ate bread every morning. Daniel solved the problem with Timon. He rearranged his sleeping area, a waterproof mattress, a light blanket that was easy to wash, and most importantly, he placed his bed next to the older boy's bed, not above him, next to him, so he wouldn't feel lonely. A week later, Timon stopped wetting the bed. Not right away, gradually, but he stopped. Sarah said it wasn't magic. It was safety. A child who feels safe stops being afraid of the night. It was harder with Walter and Greta. Daniel put them in separate tents. He gave it time. 2 weeks later, Greta came to Khan's smithy for a knife. Walter stood nearby. He was repairing the handle of a hammer. They didn't speak, but they were in the same space. That was enough for a start. Yuna became the eyes and ears of the camp. Every evening she came to Daniel. She told him who was sick, who was sad, who was angry, who was in love, who was fighting, who was homesick. She saw everything. She remembered everything. And Daniel could finally act not blindly, but with precision. He knew where to look, who to help, what to change. On the 95th day, Daniel did something for Yona that she hadn't asked for. A sanctuary tent. A separate one, small, quiet. Inside, a table, a pen, ink, a stack of blank paper, and shelves, empty shelves. He told her she could write things down. Names, stories, the ones in her head, all those dead people she carries with her. She could put them down on paper, let them go. Not forget them, but let them go. Yuna stood in the tent. She looked at the table, at the paper, at the empty shelves that were waiting. She sat down silently, took a pen, began to write. The first name. Daniel left, closed the curtain. An hour later, he heard her crying through the fabric, quietly, with relief, like a person who had finally put down a burden they had carried for too long. On the 100th day, there were 180 people in the camp, 6 tents, a smithy, a kitchen, a bakery, a workshop, a medical unit, a warehouse, a sanctuary. The 103rd day. The morning began with rain, the first serious downpour since Daniel had arrived in Ayrton. A wall of water, thunder, lightning on the horizon. The tents held, not a single drop inside. Adaptation to the environment was working. The walls had sealed up. Drainage appeared on its own. Grooves around the tents carried the water away. People sat inside, dry and warm. Through the passageways, it was possible to go from the living quarters to the kitchen, and from the kitchen to the medical unit, without ever stepping out into the rain. Markel stood under the awning at the entrance and watched at the downpour. He said that in the army, tents would flood in rain like this. Soldiers slept in the mud, officers cursed. The supply train would break down. Here, 180 people sat in the warmth and ate hot bread. He shook his head and went to check on the sentries. On the 105th day, the rain stopped, and people appeared on the path out of the forest. Not refugees. 5 horsemen. Fine horses. Fine clothes. Cloaks with coats of arms. Not Westmark. A different coat of arms. Markel narrowed his eyes. He said these were the coats of arms of the Class Bureau, a government agency. They track rare and dangerous classes, register them, monitor them. Sometimes they seize carriers for research. Torvin turned pale. He said the office was serious business, not tax collectors. These guys won't leave if we pack up. They'll keep looking. 5 of them dismounted. The leader was middle-aged, around 50, lean, wiry, intelligent eyes, attentive, dressed simply but expensively. The class was not visible, but from the way the 4 moved around him, it was clear they were security, and that they were guarding someone of considerable importance. He introduced himself, Registrar Wayne, Westmark Class Registry. He said he had not come with threats, with questions. A class of campers had not appeared in the registries for over 100 years. The registry was interested. It wanted to understand what kind of class this was and what it was capable of. Daniel stood before him, calmly. Behind him were 180 people, 6 tents, a small town. He asked what would happen if he refused to answer. Wayne smiled, subtly. He said nothing would happen. The office isn't the army. They don't coerce. They observe. They record. They draw conclusions. and they passed those conclusions on to the decision-makers. Daniel understood. This wasn't an interrogation, it was reconnaissance. Polite, professional, and all the more dangerous for it than a rough tax squad. He said he'd show him the camp. On one condition. The registrar walks with him. Not alone, not on his own route. With him. And he would see only what Daniel wanted to show. Wayne agreed. Daniel led him through the camp. He showed him the kitchen where Nola was cooking lunch. He showed him the medical unit where Sarah was changing a child's bandage. He showed him the school where the children were learning the alphabet. He showed him the blacksmith shop where Han was forging hinges. He showed him the bakery where Irma was kneading dough. He showed him the workshop where Bren was planing boards. He showed him Gareth's garden beds. He showed him Corvin's warehouse. He showed him Yoon's sanctuary. Wayne watched. He said nothing. He made notes in a small notebook. 2 hours later, they sat down by the tent. Wayne asked what his level was. Daniel said 6. Wayne wrote it down. He asked what skills. Daniel listed them. Tent construction, modular specialization, camp connectivity, interior space larger than exterior, environmental adaptation, library of schematics. Wayne took notes. He was silent. Then he closed the book. He looked at Daniel. He said that in 30 years at the Chancellery, he had seen thousands of classes. Combat, magic, craft, rare, unique. None of them had created what he had seen today. Not tents, not houses, not city. A society. He said it was dangerous, not for people, for the system, for order, for the kingdoms that stand on the earth and consider the earth their own. Because if you can build a city that isn't tied to the earth, then what's the point of kings? Daniel was silent. Wayne stood up. He said he would submit a report. No recommendations, just the facts. What happens next is not up to him. He turned and left. The 5 horsemen rode off, quietly. No threats, no promises. Markel approached. He said this was worse than the tax collectors. They wanted money. These ones want to understand. And once they understand, they'll decide what to do. Torvin agreed. He said the Chancellery reports directly to the Royal Council. If the Council decides the camp is a threat, they won't send 12 horsemen. They'll send 300. Daniel nodded. He knew. The time of peaceful life by the river was coming to an end. On the 108th day, he gathered his inner circle. Sarah, Markel, Torvin, Han, Bren, Nola, Corvin, Yuna. 8 people around the table in the living tent. Daniel told them straight out. Westmark wouldn't leave them alone. Not the tax office, not the Chancellery, not the army. They were too big to be ignored and too mobile to be controlled. Sooner or later, they would have to choose. Submit or leave. Markel said that submitting meant joining the ranks, paying taxes, handing over recruits, ceasing to be themselves, becoming part of a system that abandons the wounded because evacuation is inefficient. Sarah clenched her fist at those words. Torvin said that leaving means becoming an enemy. A camp that renounces allegiance is a rebellion. They hang people for rebellion. Khan said he didn't care. He's old. He doesn't care about kings. He needs an anvil and to be left alone. Bren said he's hobbling on one leg. What kind of rebel is he? Nola said her children were here. Gareth's children were here. She would go wherever Daniel told her to. Corvin nodded silently. Yuna said quietly that in the archives of the Order of Stability, she had read about the tent dweller class, a long time ago, back when she was still a priestess. A single line in an old register. The tent dweller class. Status? Banned by order of the first king of Westmark, 300 years ago. Everyone fell silent. Daniel looked at her. He asked what banned meant. Una said she didn't know. There was only one line, no explanation. But if the class was banned 300 years ago, that means someone once did something to this class that kings are still afraid of to this day. Daniel sat and thought. A banned class. Not a trash class. Banned. Someone deliberately made it so that this class would be considered useless, so that the bearer himself would believe he was unlucky, so that he wouldn't try, wouldn't search, wouldn't build. He didn't believe it. He pitched a tent on the first night, for the wounded woman and the girl with the doll, and he hasn't stopped since. He looked at the people at the table. 8 people, his inner circle. The blacksmith, a carpenter, a hunter, healer, cook, accountant, keeper of names, soldier. All with classes the world considered average or trash. All who had found their place in his tents. He said to leave, not to run, to leave. Calmly, organized. Break camp and head south. To lands that do not belong to the neutral territory between the kingdoms. To a place where there are no flags, no taxes, no chancellery. Markel asked when. Daniel said, in 3 days. We need to prepare. Stock up on provisions. Warn the people. Gather everything we can carry. On the 109th day, Daniel went to Havencross to see the town elder, Graham. He sat down across from him. He said they were leaving. Graham was silent. Then he asked why. Daniel explained. The office. The tax office. Sooner or later, they'll come with force. If the camp stays here, Havencross will come under attack along with it. Better to leave. Graham was silent for a long time. Then he said that in 3 months, Daniel's camp had done more for Havencross than Westmark had in 10 years. Repaired houses, sharpened plows, fed people, taught his own residents that refugees aren't a burden, but neighbors. He held out his hand, said that if help was needed, he should send a messenger. He wouldn't forget. Daniel shook his hand. By the evening of the 109th day, the camp knew. Daniel announced it himself. Standing in the center, 180 people around him. He said that in the morning they were leaving, south, to neutral lands, that the tents would go with them, that everything they had built here, they would build again, there, and better. The people were silent. Some nodded. Some stood with stony faces. The children didn't understand. Lily stood next to Daniel, holding his hand, a doll in the other. She didn't ask where. She knew. Wherever he went, she would go. The morning of the 110th day. The camp was packed up in 25 minutes, a record for 180 people. 6 bundles, 6 tents packed into bags. The carts were loaded, the stretchers were hoisted. The column formed. Markel in front, Torvin on the flanks, Daniel in the center, Lily beside him, Sarah beside him. Una counted the people. 182. 2 people from Havencross decided to go with them, that red-haired messenger boy, and his mother. She said her son hadn't stopped talking about tents ever since he ate fish on the other side of the river. The column moved south. 182 people. 6 tents in sacks. A blacksmith with a hammer. A carpenter on a wooden leg. A hunter with 3 knives. A healer with a dry sense of humor. A cook with golden hands. An accountant who remembers every grain. The keeper of names who remembers every face. A soldier who had found something to defend, and a tent maker, level 6, who didn't know how to fight, couldn't cast spells, couldn't rule, knew only one thing: how to make places where people felt at home. They were heading south, along the road between kingdoms, between wars, between worlds. The journey south took 2 weeks, 182 people, 6 tents in bags. The carts creaked, the children were fussy, the old people lagged behind. Every evening Daniel set up camp. Every morning he broke it down, 14 times. 14 new clearings, 14 dawns. Markel led the column through forests and hills along hunting trails, bypassing the main roads. Torvin posted sentries at every campsite. Nola cooked on the go. Hot porridge at rest stops. Irma's bread at every dinner. Sarah treated blistered feet and colds. Una counted the people at every crossing. Not a single one lost. Not a single one left behind. On the 124th day, the column reached the Elvenstad plain. Wide, flat, grass up to the waist, a river to the east, a forest to the west. No man's land. No flags. No fortresses. No patrols. A neutral zone between Westmark to the north and the Kingdom of Solvin to the south. Markel said no one lived here. Too open. Too far from trade routes. Too close to the line where creatures sometimes appear. Daniel looked out at the plain. Flat. No walls, no towers, no cover. Perfect. He set up camp. All 6 tents at once. For the first time in an open space without trees or hills. The tents sprang up from the grass like mushrooms after rain, connected by walkways. The interior space opened up. People walked in and breathed out. Home again. A roof again. Warmth again. Lily ran into her room. She checked the cord. She tugged it. Daniel's bell rang. She peeked out and said it was working. Daniel nodded. It works. The first week in Elvenstad passed quietly. Gareth found good land by the river. He began plowing. Con chose a spot for a new smithy. Bren was building. Nola was cooking. Life went on, but the silence was deceptive. On the 130th day, Markel returned from scouting. His face was hard. He said that 2 days' journey to the west lay the city of Mooring. That very one. Dead. Burned by the creature 3 months ago. But now a chain of destroyed villages stretched south from Mooring. New ones. Fresh ones. The creature had returned. Or another creature. The dark breach front was creeping south. Slowly. Relentlessly. Daniel stood at the edge of the camp and looked west. Something was moving there beyond the horizon. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. The tents could feel it. The walls on the western side were growing denser, heavier, adaptation to the environment. The tents sensed the threat and reacted. On the 132nd day, refugees arrived. Not 5, not 10, 60 people. From the town of Altwyn to the southwest. The town was still standing, but the walls had cracked and the people had fled. Without waiting for the creature to arrive, smart, Daniel took them all in. 240 people. On the 134th day, another 40. On the 136th, another 20. By the end of the 4th month, 312 people were living in the camp. Pa. Daniel blinked. Level 7, interior space. A tent the size of a marquee can hold a 2-story house, 7 active tents at a time, and a new skill. Accelerated setup and takedown. Setup time reduced to 2 minutes per tent. Takedown takes 3 minutes. Daniel reorganized the following 7 tents. Residential quarter, medical quarter, kitchen quarter with a bakery, workshop quarter with 3 forges, because Con was now working not alone, but with 2 apprentices from the new arrivals. Storage block, a school, and a new tent. A greenhouse tent. For Gareth. It's warm inside. It was humid. The light was soft. The plants grew twice as fast. Barley, carrots, onions, cabbage. Gareth stood in the greenhouse and cried, quietly, like Con when he saw the smithy, like Nola when she saw the kitchen, like Delia when she saw the sewing room. The same tears. The tears of people who had their livelihood back. On the 140th day, a girl came to the camp, barefoot, with a basket of herbs. Young, 19 years old, dark-skinned, dark hair tied back with a rope. She spoke with a southern accent. She asked to stay the night. Just one night. She'd leave tomorrow. She called herself Mira Alvarez, a weed picker. As she said this, she lowered her eyes. She expected ridicule. Daniel didn't laugh. He asked what weeds were in the basket.
Mira began to show them to him. One by one,
she named them. She explained. This one is for heat. This one is for coughs. This one is for wounds. This one is poisonous, but in small doses it relieves pain. This one grows only near water and smells like mint, but it's not mint, it's something completely different. She talked and talked. She showed and showed. Her eyes lit up. Her hands moved quickly. She knew every stem, every leaf, every root. Over 300 plants by sight and scent. Daniel listened for 20 minutes. Then he stopped her. He asked one thing. If she had a place where these herbs could grow in ideal conditions, would she stay? Mira froze. She looked at him. He said he needed an apothecary, a herbalist, someone who knows plants. Sarah heals with magic, but magic runs out. Herbs don't. Mira didn't answer. In the morning, Daniel set up a greenhouse tent, a second one, next to Gareth's greenhouse, but a different one. He thought about Mira, about her hands, about how she sorted through the herbs, gently, carefully, as if they were alive. Inside the greenhouse were raised beds with perfect soil, the right humidity for each species, the right light. Temperature by zone, 3 zones, warm for southern herbs, cool for mountain herbs, humid for aquatic herbs. Mira walked in. She stopped. She knelt down, touched the ground, sniffed it, looked at the light, at the humidity. Then she looked up at Daniel. She asked quietly how he knew what kind of light Earhem Mint needed. Daniel replied that he didn't know. The greenhouse knew, because he had thought of Mira when he built it. And Mira knows. The girl stood in the greenhouse that had been created for her herbs, for her knowledge. For the first time in her life, in all the kingdoms she had walked through barefoot, she had been chased away, weed gatherer, trash class, beggar, a vagrant. Nowhere, not once, did anyone ask what kind of light Earhem Mint needed. She stayed. She didn't leave the next morning, or the next, or the next. By the evening of the first week, Mira was supplying Sarah with medicinal infusions, 10 kinds, for pain, for fever, for inflammation, for coughs, for insomnia. Sarah tried the anti-inflammatory infusion on a wound of one of the new arrivals. It worked. Not like magic, slower, but it worked. And it didn't require mana, which Sarah had in limited supply. Sarah approached Mira. She said that in 10 years of army service, no herbalist had ever given her a tincture of such quality. Mira blushed. She smiled, widely, brightly, and ran to the greenhouse to check on her Earhem Mint. In the evening, by the campfire, Mira sang, in a low, warm voice, a song in the southern dialect. No one understood the words, but the melody was such that the children stopped playing and sat down to listen. Lily sat with her doll and watched Mira. Then she turned to Daniel and said that Mira was beautiful. Daniel coughed and didn't answer. Sarah stood nearby and smiled. Day 160. 6 months. Daniel sat in the tent, reading the note that Irene Jung had left on the table 3 days ago. She appeared on day 157, a young woman in a worn travel dress, 22 years old, dark hair tied in a bun, a sharp face, cold, eyes that observe and assess. She came alone, no basket, no hammer, no herbs, with slender fingers and a straight back. She introduced herself as a scribe, looking for work, can keep records. Daniel gave her a job. Corvin needed an assistant. The warehouse had expanded. The records were piling up. Irene sat down at the desk and, on her first day, sorted out 3 months of chaos in the warehouse paperwork. By evening, Corvin was standing over her records, blinking. He said she had done in a day what would have taken him a month. On the second day, she recounted all the stock. She found a discrepancy. 20 sacks of barley, according to the records, 18 in reality. 2 were missing. Corvin turned pale. Irene found the missing sacks within an hour. They were in the kitchen tent. Nola had taken them and forgotten to record it. Not theft, just a mess. Irene devised a new accounting system, in a single morning, with forms, with signatures, with double-checking. Corvin looked at the system and said it wasn't a scribe's job, it was a chancellor's job. That evening, Daniel found a note on the table, neat handwriting, straight lines, 3 points. First, the warehouse inventory has been reorganized. Second, problems have been discovered in the food distribution system. Some families receive more than others, not out of malice, out of negligence. Rationing is needed. Third, I propose creating a camp archive, resident registration, class records, skill records, property records. Without an archive, given the current population growth, chaos will ensue in a month. Signed, Irene. Daniel reread it. Then he found Irene by the warehouse. She was checking the barrels of salted meat. He asked who she was. For real. Irene straightened up, looked at him, coldly. Said she was a scribe. D. Daniel shook his head. He said that scribes couldn't reorganize the records in a day and weren't proposing to create a state archive. Irene was silent. Then she spoke softly. Irene Jung, daughter of Lord Jung, the former lord, executed 4 months ago for treason. The treason consisted of Lord Jung refusing to send the peasants to the northern front. He said it was murder. They hanged him. His estate was confiscated. Irene fled from house arrest. She hid for 3 months, changed her names, headed south, came here. Because here, they don't ask whose daughter you are. They ask what you can do. Daniel asked what her rank was. Irene pressed her lips together. She said, archivist. Daniel asked what that meant. She explained. She reads any document, in any language, memorizes them by heart, spots forgeries, can reconstruct erased text from ink traces on paper, a middle-class rank in the hierarchy. Not trash, not prestigious, a class for librarians and bureaucrats. She had despised it since childhood. She wanted to be a warrior, like her father. She ended up in the class of a pen pusher. Daniel looked at her. Then he said one sentence. He said that without her, he would tear this camp apart in 2 weeks. Irene blinked. For the first time, something other than cold flashed across her face. Surprise. Daniel explained. 300 people, records, accounting, allocation, negotiations, documents. He's an engineer. He builds tents. He doesn't know how to manage, doesn't know how to handle bureaucracy, doesn't know how to create accounting systems. She does. Her class was made for this. He proposed it. She runs the entire administrative apparatus of the camp. Complete freedom in her field. The only condition? They discuss every decision together. Irene was silent for a minute. Then she said she had a condition. A tent. She needs an archive tent, with shelves, with a filing cabinet, with proper lighting, with a lock, because documents are the foundation of any state, and keeping them in a pile on a warehouse table is barbaric. Daniel smiled, for the first time in a long while. He said he'd make it happen. The archive tent went up next to the living quarters. Inside, floor-to-ceiling shelves, a desk with a slanted writing surface. The lighting was bright, but soft. A filing cabinet. 3 chairs, because Irene didn't work alone, but with 2 assistants she'd found on her very first day. And a lock on the door. A small one. Symbolic. But a lock. Documents are documents. Irene walked into the archive. She walked around slowly. She touched the shelves. Ran her fingers along the desk. Sat down at the desk. Placed her hands on the surface. Sat like that for a minute. Then she looked up at Daniel, who was standing at the entrance. She said quietly that she had had a study in her father's house. Small, with shelves and a desk. The only place where she felt like herself. When her father was hanged, the study was burned along with the house. All the documents, all the books, everything. Daniel said nothing. He just nodded and left. Over the next month, Irene reorganized the camp. Not physically, administratively. Every resident is registered: name, age, class, skills, medical history, family ties, food distribution according to rations, work schedules, duty rosters. Everything is documented. Everything is on the shelves. Everything is accessible. The camp ceased to be a chaos of good intentions. It became a mechanism, functioning, predictable, fair. There were fewer conflicts, not because Irene was kinder than Daniel. She was meaner, harsher, colder. But she was fair, and fairness that can be verified by documents is better than kindness that cannot be measured. They argued. Every day. Irene said rules were needed, strict ones, clear ones, the same for everyone. Daniel said rules kill what makes the camp, an individual approach, a blanket for everyone, a blanket of the right thickness, a chair of the right height. You can't standardize that. Irene replied that you can't manage 300 people with individual agreements. You need a system. Daniel replied that a system was exactly what they had fled from. They argued for an hour, 2, 3. Then they found a compromise. A system for distribution, individuality for the tents, rules for the common good, care for the private sphere. They argued, and both of them looked forward to these arguments. Daniel, because Irene was the only person in the camp who didn't automatically agree with him. Irene, because Daniel was the only person who argued with her not out of a desire for power, but out of conviction. On the 171st day, Irene brought Daniel a piece of paper. Just one, neatly written. The Charter of the Elvenstad Nomadic Community. Preamble. Everyone who arrives gets a roof over their head. Everyone who stays gets a job. Everyone who works gets an equal share. No one is expelled because of their class. No one is punished for their past. Decisions regarding the camp's movement are made by the camp leader. Decisions regarding distribution are made by the council. The council consists of the heads of departments: blacksmithing, medical, housekeeping, security, archives, education, agriculture. Daniel read, for a long time. Then he looked at Irene. She stood straight, hands behind her back, her face inscrutable, waiting. He said 1 point needed to be added. She asked which one. He said, "Every resident has the right to a tent made just for them. Not a communal one, a personal one. This is not a privilege, it is a right."
Because in this camp, every person is seen, and everyone is important.
Irene wrote it down. For the first time, he saw her hand tremble as she wrote. That evening by the campfire, Daniel showed the charter to the council. There were 7 people: Sarah, Markel, Torvin, Khan, Nola, Corvin, Una, Irene. They read, in silence. Khan said the papers weren't his. But if the paper said that everyone was important, then he was in favor. Sarah nodded. Markel, too. Una said quietly that this was the first document in her memory in which a person is more important than the state. The camp adopted the charter. 312 people. The nomadic community's first political decision. That evening, Irene stood by the archives. Daniel approached. She didn't turn around. She said quietly that her father had dreamed of this, of a state where a person is more important than a title. For that, they hanged him. Daniel stood beside her, silently. Irene turned around. Her eyes were shining. She said that if they hanged him for this charter, she would personally write a chronicle so that in 300 years, people would remember. Daniel replied that he would try to prevent it. Irene smiled for the first time. Sharply. Briefly. Like a flash. And she walked into the archives. Daniel watched her go and thought that this woman was more dangerous than any army, and that without her, the camp would truly fall apart in 2 weeks. Day 180. Winter came early. The temperature dropped. The first snow fell on the Elvenstad plain like a thin white blanket. The tents reacted. The walls thickened. They insulated themselves. It grew warmer inside. The adaptation system worked flawlessly. Outside, it was -10. Inside, it was 22 degrees. People walked through the passageways between the tents in light clothing. Daniel stood on a hill and looked at the camp in the snow. 7 tents. Dark green tents on a white field. Smoke from the kitchen chimney. Light in the school windows. The clang of a hammer from Khan's workshop. Children's laughter from somewhere inside. Beautiful. Strangely beautiful. A city without walls in the middle of a winter plain. On the 185th day, a caravan approached the camp. Not refugees, merchants. 15 carts. Guards, goods under tarps. The caravan leader was a fat man in a fur coat. He introduced himself. Merchant Lannis. He was traveling from Solven to Westmark. He saw the camp from the road, decided to stop by, to find out what kind of people they were, what they sold, what they bought. Daniel welcomed him, showed him around the camp. Lannis watched. His eyes were oily, calculating. He saw the smithy. He saw the furniture workshop. He saw the greenhouse with vegetables in winter. He saw the bakery. He tasted Irma's bread. He fell silent for a moment. Then he proposed a deal. He would bring in raw materials: metal, wood, fabric. The camp would make the goods: horseshoes, furniture, clothing, bread. He would sell them in the cities. They would split the profits 50-50. Daniel looked at Irene. Irene looked at Lannis. She said the terms were negotiable. 60-40 split. 60 to the camp. Lannis laughed.
He said 55 to 45, 55 to the camp. Irene said she wanted to see his invoices. Lannis stopped laughing. He looked at her intently. He asked who she was. Irene replied that she was the archivist. Lannis nodded, slowly. He took out the invoices. Irene read them, in a minute. Every line. She said that 2 items were fake. The wool was listed at a purchase price that was 1/3 higher than the actual price, and the weight of the tin was overstated by 1/4. Lannis turned pale. Then he blushed. Then he laughed, sincerely. He said it had been a long time since he'd been caught like that. Fine. Fair terms. A deal. A caravan every 2 weeks. He brings it in, the camp produces it, he takes it away. Everyone's happy. The first caravan left 2 days later, with 20 of Khan's horseshoes, with 10 of Brenna's chairs, with a sack of Mira's dried herbs, with 3 loaves of Irma's bread, with a roll of Delia's fabric. Trade. Real trade. The camp was making money. On the 191st day, Caitlin Brennan arrived, 25 years old, captain of the Westmark City Guard, leading a detachment of 50 soldiers, with orders to arrest the camp leader and take him to the capital for questioning. Torben saw the detachment approaching. He sounded the alarm. Markel let out the sentries. The camp fell silent. 312 people, 50 soldiers. Daniel stepped out to meet them, alone, unarmed, as always. Caitlin dismounted, tall, broad-shouldered, short, light hair, a stern face, professional, a cohort commander, a prestigious combat class. She held out a scroll, an arrest warrant, the seal of the class chancellery, the signature of the royal secretary. Daniel read it. Irene stood nearby. She read it too. She said quietly that the document was genuine. Daniel nodded. He looked at Caitlin. He said he wouldn't go. Caitlin said she had orders. Daniel said he understood, but he wouldn't go. He suggested something else. 3 days. Let Caitlin and her people spend 3 days in the camp. Let them look around, talk to the people, eat, sleep, and then decide. Caitlin frowned. She said the decision had already been made. The order was signed. Daniel said quietly that the order had been signed by a man who had never been here. Let her stay here for 3 days and then decide whether to carry it out. This isn't a trick. It's an invitation. Caitlin was silent. Her lieutenant behind her whispered something about the order. She raised her hand. The lieutenant fell silent. She said, "All right. 3 days." 50 soldiers set up camp. Daniel didn't put up a separate tent. He housed them in the residential quarter, among the people. The soldiers slept on cots next to the refugees. They ate at the same table. Their cots were personalized, every single one. Overnight, Daniel had rearranged part of the residential block for 50 soldiers. A little something for everyone. A separate corner for the one who snores, a double blanket for the one who's cold, a pillow of the right height for the one whose shoulder aches from an old injury. He didn't know them, but Yuna walked past the formation as they entered and told him everything in 10 minutes. The first day. Caitlin walked around the camp, silently. She looked at the school, at the smithy, at the bakery, at the medical unit where Sarah was treating a child's ear, at the greenhouse where Mira was tending to the seedlings, at the archives where Irene was arguing with Corvin about grain rationing. Day 2. Caitlin sat in the kitchen. She drank tea. She listened as Nola and Irma argued the oven temperature. She saw Bren on a wooden leg hauling planks to the workshop. Gareth showing the children how to plant seeds. Khan teaching an apprentice how to hold a hammer. In the evening, she went to the medical ward. Sarah was working, changing a bandage on a soldier from Caitlin's unit. He had, during training. Sarah grumbled at him just as she grumbled at everyone else. The soldier obeyed. Caitlin stood and watched. The third night, 2:00. Daniel wasn't sleeping. He was sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea. The blacksmith's child had fallen ill. Fever, cough. Sarah was treating him. Daniel sat nearby. He held the boy's hand. The boy was 4. He was crying. Daniel was telling him something, quietly, about tents, about stars, about a rabbit that lived in the forest. The boy fell asleep. Daniel sat there and didn't take his hand away. Caitlin stood in the doorway and watched. On the morning of the 4th day, Caitlin left the camp. She lined up her squad, 50 men, standing at attention, waiting for orders. Caitlin silently removed the captain's insignia from her neck, a bronze medallion bearing the Westmark coat of arms. She walked over to Daniel. She placed the medallion on the table in front of him. She said she was no longer captain. She said she had seen enough. She said that she had served the crown for 12 years, and in those 12 years, not a single officer had ever sat by a sick child's bedside at night. Daniel looked at the medallion, then at her. He asked about her men. Caitlin turned to the ranks. She asked who was leaving. 30 out of 50 stepped forward. They left. 20 remained. Caitlin turned to Daniel. She said there were 20 fighters with combat ranks, trained, disciplined, under her command. If he accepted. Daniel accepted. 332 people, 20 professional soldiers, a captain with a prestigious combat class, and a camp worker who sits with a sick child at night. Caitlin became head of security. Torvin accepted this without argument. He knew his place. A corporal, not a captain. Caitlin reorganized the defenses in a week. Posts, patrols, training, a signaling system, evacuation routes. She did it the same way she did everything. Precisely. Tough. Professional. And for the first time in her life, she was protecting rather than suppressing. For the first time, her soldiers stood at their posts not because they were ordered to, but because of what was behind them. Day 200. Winter was in full swing. The camp stood firm. The tents were insulated. The greenhouses were working. The forge was blazing. Bread was baking. The children were studying. 800 people. Over the past 2 months, the community had tripled in size. Refugees were pouring in. From the north, from the west. The front of darkness was, and people fled before it as before a tidal wave. Daniel reached the 10th level, 12 tents at once. The interior space on the 10th level could hold an entire city block. The camp had become a city, with streets, with squares, with a fountain in the center, because one of the tents generated a water supply, with a library, because Irene had collected 300 books saved by refugees from the dead cities. Daniel stood in the central square and watched. Paved, smooth, with benches, with lanterns that glowed with a soft light without fire or oil. Tent magic. A boy rode past on something resembling a bicycle. Daniel reconstructed the design from memory. Khan had forged the frame. Bren had assembled it. The children fought over whose turn it was. 800 people. A city. His city. On the 210th day, a messenger arrived from the west. Not a refugee. A soldier. From the garrison of the city of Mirkwood. The city stood 40 kilometers to the west. 5,000 inhabitants. Walls. A garrison. And the creature of darkness approaching from the north. The destroyer. The very same type that wiped out Mooring overnight. The garrison wouldn't be able to stop it. The walls wouldn't hold. The garrison commander asked for help. Not combat help. Evacuation help. He'd heard about the tent dwellers' camp that was packing up and leaving. He asked to take in civilians if the city falls. Daniel called a council. 9 people. Sarah, Markel, Torvin, Khan, Nola, Corvin, Una, Irene, Caitlin. He said he would go. Caitlin said it was madness. The creature is a tent destroyer. Daniel said he wasn't going to fight the creature. He was going to get people out. Everyone he could, before the creature reached the city. Sarah said she needed to be there. There would be wounded. Lots of them. Markel said he'd go too. We need reconnaissance. We need to know where the creature is coming from and how long it will take. Irene said they need a plan. Hour by hour, minute by minute.
5,000 people isn't 60. It's a different scale.
Daniel nodded. He said that to do this, he'd have to do something he'd never done before. A fortress tent. Caitlin raised an eyebrow. Daniel explained. A tent with reinforced walls, with a defensive perimeter, with enough interior space for thousands of people. Not for an attack, for a shield. To buy time. He closed his eyes. He thought. Not about the walls, about the people behind them. About the 5,000 he had never seen. About the children, about the elderly, about those who were now sitting in Merwood behind walls that wouldn't hold, waiting. The skill activated. He felt the system respond. A new configuration, a fortress tent, reinforced walls, a defensive perimeter, watch points, maximum interior space. On the 11th level, which he hadn't reached yet, it would be an entire field. On the 10th, a block, but a block into which 1,000 people could be squeezed, maybe more. They set out at dawn, 200 people, volunteers. Caitlin with 20 soldiers, Markel with scouts, Sarah with 4 assistants, Daniel with the tents. Torvin stayed at the camp, with the rest, to guard, to hold. The march took a day. By evening they saw Merwood. The city stood. For now. The walls were high, stone, beautiful, and useless. Daniel could see cracks even from a distance, old masonry, not built to withstand the destroyer. The sky was darkening on the northern horizon. Not clouds, something else. Thick, dark, moving. Darkness. Markel said the creature would be here in 6 hours, maybe 8, no more. Daniel entered the city through the gates. The garrison commander met him, Captain Woltz. Not young, gray-haired, tired. He asked how many people Daniel could take in. Daniel said everyone. Woltz didn't believe him. He said there were 5,000 in the city. Daniel repeated himself. Everyone. The evacuation began. Irene had drawn up a plan while they were still on the road, on paper, minute by minute. Caitlin coordinated the movement of people. Markel conducted reconnaissance to the north. Sarah set up a medical station outside the walls. Daniel pitched tents, one after another, in the field south of the city. He set up a fortress tent, the first in history. A tent on the outside. A large one, 10 by 10 meters. Inside, an entire neighborhood. The walls were reinforced, as solid as stone, but not stone. Fabric. Magical fabric that was stronger than stone, because stone stands firm, but fabric bends, and what bends does not break. He set up living tents nearby, 5, 6, 8, 10, all 12 at most. The interior space of each was stretched to the limit. People poured in, from the city gates, along the road, into the tents. Families, the elderly, children, the wounded, the sick, pregnant women. 5,000 people, 6 hours. Irene stood at the entrance and counted. She directed them. That family over there, these elderly people here, the wounded to the medical unit, the children to the school tent that Daniel had set up simply because children need a place where they aren't afraid. Yuna walked among the people, memorizing. Everyone, every face, every name. Nola was feeding them from the field kitchen. Porridge, bread, tea, non-stop. 6 hours. Mira handed out soothing herbal teas to those who couldn't stop shaking. 5 hours later, the city was empty. 5,000 people inside the tents. Captain Woltz stood before the empty walls. His garrison stood nearby. 150 soldiers. Daniel approached, said one thing. Leave. The walls won't save you. I will. Woltz looked at the tents. In the field outside the city, 12 tents, in which sat 5,000 of his men. He pulled off his helmet, ordered the garrison to retreat to the tents. The creature arrived an hour later. Daniel saw it from the top of the watchtower of the fortified tent. Huge, black, 4 paws, each as thick as a tree, armored hide, eyes like burning coals. It was heading toward the city, slowly, confidently, like a creature that knows nothing can stop it. It slammed into the wall. The stone cracked. A second blow. The wall collapsed. The creature entered the city. An empty city. Not a single person. Not a single scream. Not a single scent of life. The creature roamed the streets. It tore down houses. It smashed walls. Empty. All empty. It roared, a sound that made the earth tremble. But there was no one to roar at. In the tents, 5,000 people sat in silence. Children clung to their mothers. The elderly prayed. Volt's soldiers stood with weapons in hand, staring at the walls of the tent fortress that did not tremble. Solid walls, a security perimeter. The creature didn't sense them. The tents didn't smell of stone. They didn't smell of wood. They didn't smell of the city. They smelled of fabric, grass, wind. The creature didn't know what a tent was. Throughout the history of the breach, creatures had broken down walls, stormed towers, crushed gates. No one had ever pitched a tent in front of them. It was beyond their comprehension. By morning, the creature had left, northward, back to the rift, as always. It came, it destroyed, it left, like a tide. Mirkwood lay in ruins. The walls had collapsed. Year 1, day 270. The camp became a legend. After Mirkwood, 2,500 people joined the community. Residents of the saved city, the Volt's garrison, refugees who heard and came. 2,500 people. A mobile city with streets, squares, 3 forges, a school for 200 children, a library, a hospital with 100 beds, a bakery, 2 greenhouses, workshops, an archive, a sanctuary, and a bicycle. Just one. The children were still fighting over whose turn it was. Daniel on the 12th level. 20 tents at once. The interior space on the 12th level could hold a small city district. The library of schematics stored 147 configurations. Each one remembered everyone for whom it had been created. The Order of Stability declared Daniel a heretic, officially, from the pulpits, in every temple of Westmark. Archbishop Marcus Halden personally signed the edict. A tent dweller is an enemy of order and the settled life pleasing to the gods. Anyone who joins his camp will be excommunicated. Anyone who helps him will be cursed. Daniel read the copy of the edict brought by the merchant Lannis. He set it aside, shrugged, said that gods who do not approve of a roof over a child's head are not gods worth listening to. On the 280th day, on a winter night, a spy from the Chancellery of Classes attempted to kill Daniel. A knife in the darkness. Quiet footsteps. A man they had hired a month ago. Quiet. Polite. He worked in the warehouse. No one suspected him. Except Yoon. She noticed something was off. The man said he was from the village of Sunderfield, but his accent was that of the capital. His hands were those of a scribe, not a farmer. His eyes darted around as he passed the archives. Yuna told Caitlin. Caitlin posted a guard at Daniel's tent. The spy came at night. The guard intercepted him. The knife was confiscated. The spy was subdued. Caitlin and Markel conducted the interrogation. The man turned out to be an agent of the Chancellery. The mission? To eliminate the bearer of the forbidden class. Quietly, without a trace. Blame it on bandits. Daniel was present during the interrogation. He listened in silence. Then he asked one thing. Why forbidden? The spy fell silent. Then he said he didn't know the details. He only knew the order came from above, very high up. Not from the Chancellery, from the Royal Council. Daniel looked at Irene. Irene nodded. She had already been searching. Ever since the day Yuna mentioned the forbidden class, Irene had been searching. Every document that came into the camp, every book, every scroll. Her class allowed her to read erased texts, to see what others could not. And she found it. On the 291st day, Irene came to Daniel. Evening. Everyone was asleep. She placed a stack of papers in front of him. Records, copies, reconstructed fragments of erased documents from books brought from Mirkwood, from the library that Irene was one of the first to save. She said she had found it. 300 years ago, a man named Elric Vandermeer lived in Ayrton, a tent maker. He did the same thing Daniel did. He took in people, he built tents, he moved, he grew. In 20 years, he created a nomadic state, 10,000 people, cities on wheels, tents that were bigger than castles, workshops that produced the best weapons on the continent, hospitals where they treated people for free, schools where everyone was taught. Elric didn't fight. He didn't conquer. He didn't claim thrones. He simply was. And that was enough to make kings tremble. Because people were leaving. From the cities, from the villages, from behind the walls. They went to Elric. Because life in his tents was better than behind the royal walls. Because in his camp, everyone was seen. Everyone was important. Everyone got a tent of their own. Peasants were leaving. Artisans were leaving. Soldiers were leaving. Kings were losing their subjects, losing taxes, losing armies. They lost their purpose. Why do you need a king if a tent dweller provides better? The first king of Westmark convened a secret council. 7 mages of the highest order, 3 archbishops. They passed judgment. Elric was killed. At night, in his sleep, with a dagger, just as a spy had tried to kill Daniel. Then they erased him, from the temple records, from the books, from memory. The Council of Mages distorted the system. They forced it to mark the tent maker class as trash whenever it appeared, so that the next host would believe himself unfit. Didn't try, didn't build, didn't create. It worked for 300 years. For 300 years, not a single tent dweller revealed their class. Everyone believed it was trash. Everyone gave up. Except Daniel. Daniel read and remained silent for a long time. Then he looked up at Irene. She stood there waiting. He asked how he ended up here, why him specifically. Irene placed the final document before him, the most important one, a fragment reconstructed from a charred page. Before his death, Elric knew they would come for him. He managed to create a tent that didn't exist in the system, a beacon tent. Not for shelter, not for protection, for a summons. A structure that activated at the moment of the world's critical need. The dark's breakthrough. The rift. A front creeping southward that no one could resist. The world was in need. The beacon worked.
300 years later, it reached a man on the other end of reality, an engineer on Route 170 who fell asleep at the wheel after 3 days without sleep, and dragged him here. Daniel sat and was silent. A minute, 2, 3. Then he said one thing quietly. "I understand, old man. I won't let you down." Irene stood there. She looked at him. For the first time she called him Dan. Quietly, almost a whisper. He looked at her. She didn't look away. On the 300th day, the army of the Order of Stability appeared on the horizon. 6,000 men. Siege engines, battle mages. Archbishop Marcus Halden in person, at the head, in white armor, with a staff. A fanatic who had come to destroy heresy. They approached from the west. From the east, by chance or not, the first great wave of the breach creatures was moving. Not a single destroyer. Dozens of creatures. Small ones, medium ones, large ones. A pack. The order went to stop them, but they didn't make it in time. Now 6,000 men stood between the pack and the camp. Halden sent a messenger, an ultimatum: surrender or die. Daniel left the camp, alone, unarmed. He walked across the winter field toward the Order's army line. The snow crunched under his feet. The wind blew in his face. 2,500 people stood behind him and watched. Sarah stood by the medical unit, her hands clenched. Irene stood by the archives. Her face was pale. Caitlin stood at the gate of the fortress tent, hand on his sword. Mira stood by the greenhouse. She held a basket of herbs to her chest. Yuna stood in the center. She was counting people, everyone, both in the camp and in the army. Lily stood at the entrance to the living quarters, with a doll, silent, watching Daniel walk away. Daniel reached the line. Halden stood before him, tall, thin. His white armor gleamed. His eyes burned with faith, real, sincere. This man was no villain. He was a fanatic, which was worse. Daniel spoke, calmly. He said the Archbishop had 4 hours, maybe 6, before the pack got here. He said he could evacuate his army, all 6,000, break camp, take them inside, lead them across the river, turn around there. There was one price. Halden would publicly confirm that Daniel was not the heretic. Halden was silent. The wind ruffled his white cloak. Then he asked, what if he refused? Daniel answered with what he was thinking. He said that in that case he would take the wounded. Not Halden's consent, their lives, as many as he could manage. Halden looked at him for a long time. Behind him, 6,000 soldiers. Before him, a single unarmed man. In the east, the sky was darkening. The swarm was approaching. Time was running out. Halden turned toward the east. He looked at the darkening horizon, then back at Daniel. He said quietly, "Go ahead." Daniel nodded. He turned toward the camp. He raised his hand, a signal,
The camp moved, like a machine, like an organism, like a single being. Thousands of hands, thousands of feet. 15 minutes to pack up 20 tents. 2,500 people in a column. Caitlin coordinated the movement of the Order's army into the perimeter. 6,000 soldiers entered the tents, with weapons, with siege engines, with horses. The interior of the fortress tent held them all, everyone, cramped, tightly, but all of them. Parallel to the camp, refugees from the nearest villages were running, hundreds, thousands. They saw the army and the pack and ran to the only place that seemed safe, to the tents. Daniel was taking them in, everyone. Una counted
3,000, 5,000, 7,000, 10,000. The tents creaked. Daniel felt every seam, every thread. The system was working at its limit. Level 12 and all it could offer. In 3 hours, he packed up the camp and set it up again, surrounding the Order's army and thousands of refugees. On the southern bank of the river, 20 kilometers from the previous location. When the pack of creatures reached the Elvenstad plain, they found an empty field, trampled grass, an extinguished campfire, and a neat sign that Bren had carved in 10 minutes. It had 2 words on it. Thanks for visiting. The pack stamped their feet, howled. They howled. They headed north, like a tide. Dawn the next day. The camp stood on the south bank, huge, larger than ever. 10,000 people under the tent canopies. Soldiers of the Order sat alongside the refugees and ate porridge. Nola cooked in 10 cauldrons. Irma baked bread with 4 hands with 2 assistants. Mira was serving tea. Sarah, with 5 assistants, was stitching wounds. Khan was forging. Bren was building. Delia was sewing. Corvin was counting. Irene was writing. Una memorized. Caitlin stood guard. Marcus Halden stood in the medical board. He watched as Sarah stitched up his chaplain's hand. The chaplain had fallen from his horse while crossing the river. Sarah grumbled at him. The chaplain obeyed. Halden approached Daniel, quietly, without an entourage, without armor, in a simple shirt. Old, tired, an ordinary man. He said quietly that he wouldn't take back his words about heresy. His faith wouldn't allow it. But he wouldn't send an army anymore. He wouldn't go against the man who had saved 6,000 of his soldiers. He couldn't. Daniel nodded. He said that was enough. Halden was silent for a moment. Then he asked quietly how Daniel did it. No tents, no magic. How did he make people believe? Daniel replied that he didn't make them. He simply pitched a tent. The rest was up to the people themselves. Halden shook his head. He said that in 50 years of serving the gods, he had never seen faith stronger than what he had seen that night, when 10,000 people walked silently to the tents. No panic, no screaming, no stampede. They walked because they believed the tent maker would save them. And he did. Halden turned and walked away, slowly, hunched over. A man whose theology had cracked like the wall of Mirkwood. In the evening, by the campfire in the center of the camp, under 2 green moons, Daniel sat on Brenna's bench. Lily climbed onto his lap, a doll in her hands, a dollhouse nearby. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, alive, his daughter. Irene approached, sat down beside them, close. For the first time, she called him Dan in front of everyone. Not Mr. Park. Dan. Sarah came with 2 mugs, hot wine made from Mira's herbs. She handed one to Daniel, one to Irene. She didn't take one for herself. She didn't need it. She just needed to stand nearby and know that they were all here.
Mira tossed some twigs into the fire. She began to sing, softly, in the southern dialect, that very song. Yuna sat by the sanctuary, writing, the names of the 6,000 soldiers saved, every single one, on paper, letting them go from her mind. Caitlin stood guard at the camp entrance, straight, motionless. Behind her, 10,000 people slept. 10,000 who were safe that night. Because one man, with the most ridiculous class in the world, had pitched a tent. Han sat by the forge, hammer on his knees. Not forging, just sitting. Bren beside him, on a wooden leg, carving something small. A new dollhouse for Lily. Bigger, with 2 rooms. Nola was cleaning the kitchen. Irma was covering the dough with a cloth for the morning. Baking again tomorrow. Feeding again tomorrow. Living again tomorrow. Daniel was looking at the green moons, the very same ones, the ones he'd seen on the first night through a hole in the chapel roof. 300 days ago. A lifetime ago. He was an engineer from Colorado. He designed tents for expeditions. He died on I-70. He woke up in a strange world with a sense of belonging that made him want to cry. And now 10,000 people called his tents home. Lily stirred on his lap. She raised her head sleepily. She asked quietly, "Will we stay here tomorrow?" Daniel looked at her, at the girl who had lost her home, lost her father, lost her mother, and found a tent, and a man who hears the bell every night and comes. He said we'll stay, or we'll leave. It doesn't matter, because home isn't a place. Home is people, and their home goes with them. Lily nodded. She rested her head on his shoulder. She fell asleep, a doll in her hands. Daniel sat beneath 2 green moons. The city slept around him. His city, which can be rolled up in 20 minutes and unrolled in 15. Which has no walls because walls are a trap. Which stands not on the ground but on people. On Han with his hammer. On Sarah with her hands. On Irene with her pen. On Mira with her herbs. On Yuna with her memory. On Caitlin with her sword. On Nola with her porridge. On Irma with her bread. On Brenna with his wooden leg. On Markel with his knife. On Lily with her doll. On him, the tent maker, who doesn't make tents, who makes places where people feel at home. Elric Vandermar reached out to him 300 years later and dragged him into this war. Daniel didn't let them down, and he won't let them down. Because tomorrow, someone will come out of the forest, dirty, hungry, with eyes in which there's just enough hope left to make it here. And Daniel will set up the tent, ask what your name is, what you love, what you're afraid of, and in the morning, that person will wake up in a place made just for them, only for them, for the first time in their life. And they'll think that maybe the world isn't such a bad place after all. The campfire crackled. Mira sang. The moons shone. Lily slept. Daniel sat and didn't move. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't want to. Because right now, at this very moment, everything was in its place. Everyone was home.